So my neighbor chose this time of all times to be mowing his lawn. I may be muting myself every once in a while.
Yeah, well, they tend to do that.
Yep.
It's like every time I try to record voiceover, a loud motorcycle rides by outside. Every time. Never fails.
Oh, wait. Ladies and gentle beings, welcome to the stream. I am here with TV Skyen to discuss VTubers
Oh,
as we promised over a month ago. Skyen, go off.
yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is TB Skyen. I YouTube things, and I know very little about VTubers in general, which is why I have my good friend Lucian to teach me.
Yep. I, on the other hand, know a little too much about VTubers as I've been actively streaming for. God, how long has it been since I started? Let's see, March. Back in March, April, May, June. 4 months now. Jesus. Hi, folks. I stream log games. I obsess over VTubers, and if you see me on Twitter, I've probably interacted with most of them at this point. TV Skyen, I've gone back for quite a bit, out long before 4 months ago, but and as I'm sure most of you've seen, we've also discussed about exactly a month ago the Monster Girl phenomena in most of the most media that we tend to cover. Today, however, we'll be covering VTubers, which is more strictly my side of things, my comfort realm, and a lot of what we'll be discussing starting off right now will be the history of it, because Skyen is, as he said, relatively unfamiliar with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know about Corona because she shows up on Twitter with clips of her screaming at Mario games usually, and I know about the what's her name, this little shark girl creature, just because everyone has decided that she's the cutest thing in the entire universe. But outside of that, I'm just not familiar with the scene.
Yeah. I think early on when we started concepting this stream in particular, like a couple days ago, we were talking about like what actually qualifies as a VTuber, right? So like is it just streaming with anime characters? Is it just using live 2D? And the thing about talking about VTuber history is that if you go back as far as you can to like what qualifies as like using an animated persona as your on-screen representative, whether on YouTube or otherwise, the oldest known VTuber, strictly speaking, is the Annoying Orange. Because
oh, this is where we get into category hell. But yeah. Now there's a VTuber I remember.
Yeah. Whether or not we call this a VTuber in the modern sense is another thing altogether. But strictly speaking, what we have here is in fact a 2D avatar with a with face tracking of whoever the actual persona is behind the person, doing skits and making memes and ultimately serving as the foundation. Chat is not too pleased with this analysis, but unfortunately it is kind of true.
No, but I mean, no one's pleased when the Annoying Orange shows up.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now if we're talking about more like anime side of things, right? Then we're talking about approximately 2008, I think. No, 2011-ish, with Amy Yamato out of the UK, I believe, using a really expensive like 3D avatar to basically act as a filter over her face.
Oh, I remember seeing that around, and I was like not sure if it was like, did someone bother to hand animate all this? Like, I didn't know that motion tracking had reached a level where you could do that yet.
I'm not actually sure what technology she uses, but she's been streaming for about 10 years now using the same avatar, and apparently it's, I'm guessing it's something like a bodysuit and like a camera rig over her face, right? Like, ultimately, we've seen similar technology on TikTok filters these days now, right? So I'm thinking this is
it's
like
become very accessible.
Oh yeah, and also kind of scary. You see some of those TikTok filters, right? Especially the ones that messes with your gender appearance. Those are kind of scary, honestly.
Oh yeah, like there's a lot of trans people on TikTok being like, holy shit, like they either getting gender dysphoria from using it or getting gender euphoria when they realize, oh shit, no, actually I look terrible as my assigned gender. Fuck this shit.
Yeah, and yeah, especially for me, using the feminine ones gives me a huge amount of dysphoria. It's like, so this is what it feels like. I don't like it.
Yeah,
I don't like it at all. It's actually less disturbing to use a VTuber avatar than it used to use a filter and see your real face like just subtly changed. But in case of like Amy, right? It's I'm not completely sure of the technology behind it, but I imagine it's like a more primitive version of what Code Miko uses on Twitch. And you've seen Code Miko's streams, right?
Don't think I have, actually. It doesn't ring a bell anyway.
So imagine like a $20,000 bodysuit for like professional Hollywood grade VR, right? Like the stuff you would see like Pixar actors use to transcribe like physical action onto the screen. for VTubing.
And then used to turn someone into an anime girl.
Yep. In her case, 3D.
Well, you know.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about the precursors especially, we tend to be talking about either like 3D models like we've seen with Amy Yamato, or we're talking about like really, really primitive stand-ins, like what we would call a PNG tuber these days. Which brings up the third precursor on our list, Yahtzee. Which...
Yeah, we talked about this one. Which like also brings up the relevant question, because I've used a similar like PNG character that I kind of hand animate before, and like that's where you sort of get into the sliding scale of VTubers, where it's like how much of being a VTuber is tied to the motion tracking, because as you say, like there are PNG tubers, like people who are just like they just have a PNG that like does a little something when it registers their voice, right?
Right, like. Yeah, basically all they do is like have a flat drawing that also like lights up, like drops a gray filter whenever they're talking to show that they're actively like interacting in the chat. And like this is all like the pre-2016 era, right? Like long before anything that we considered like part of the established scene was part of it. But this is basically like laying down the groundwork of what eventually became the Kizuna Ai, Tokino Sora, everything else. But yeah, strictly speaking, if you want to go as minimally gatekeepy as possible, if we allow PNG tubers to be considered part of the VTuber scene, then Yahtzee has predated all of them since like 2008, right?
Yeah, and as someone points out in chat, the logic for personas on like YouTube debate videos would technically also count in that particular sphere, unfortunately.
Yep. In terms of like our conventional, like modern conventions or like current conventions for especially live streamers, this is obviously wouldn't necessarily apply, but like 2006, even older. Yeah, the first like zero punctuation was one of the old YouTube.
It's one of the early YouTube breakout hits. Yeah,
one of the old viral hits. Yeah, but that like this admittedly is mostly troll. I don't think anybody takes Annoying Orange seriously as a VTuber, especially with it's basically just a green screen filter over his literal eyes and face, right? So in terms of what we would actually consider a VTuber, a lot of it would stem out from like the 2016 to 2018 era, right? We're talking about, let's see, where is my? Here it is. We are talking the Kizuna Ai era of content creators coming out of 2016 to 2017, right? This is the, at this point, what was it? Motion capture technology has gotten cheap enough where small corporations outside of like the major Hollywood conglomerates can afford it for marketing purposes, right? So you're seeing the images I'm showing on screen right now are considered like the four big the four kings of VTubers in the original era, the four big ones. That would be Kizuna Ai, Siro, Mirai Akari, and what was the fourth one? I already forgot her name. Let me look on the list. And Kaguya Luna, which actually Kaguya Luna technically has retired for a bit, I think. At least that particular avatar has.
And looking at their character designs, like I'd say I start to identify things that already persist very much into the current era. Like, 'cause there's the one with the big titties, then there's the one that's just disgustingly adorable, then there's the one who's like sort of sporty girl in a nice dress, like the one with the black and red thing with the red sash around her waist. And then you got like the Genki girl, which I would say Kizuna Ai sort of falls into that, like the cheerful, sort of happy.
Yeah, and this is also one
girl
of the
next door kind of thing.
Yeah, this is also one of the major like design points we want to talk about, right? Because a lot of the conventions for VTuber designs, especially for female VTuber designs, was pretty much like formalized around this era, especially around Kizuna Ai, especially around Kaguya Luna as some of the biggest like baseline influencers there. We're talking about designs mostly stemming from a Japanese idol culture, especially.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I can certainly, in terms of the VTubers I know, I definitely see that, like, persist very hard. Although, there's been a lot more, like, the ones I've seen, like, whenever I see them around, I am sort of pleasantly surprised by the amount of variety of character archetype that's on display in the way that they're put together. Like lots of big titty, of course. Anime titty always a popular subject with men and women, but
Yeah.
but there is this thing of like some of them lean more towards like goofy comedy personas, and some of them lean heavier into we'll get to the adult aspect later.
Well, yeah, that's definitely further down on the list, and is in fact on the agenda. There is actually a fifth one that I didn't bring up, Nojo Lolly from this era. Like, we were talking about the four kings of VTubers, especially during the 2016-2018 era, where we actually tend not to consider Kizuna Ai as one of them, because she was so much bigger than everybody else. The actual fourth one, unfortunately, is a Lolly content creator that ultimately was rendered irrelevant, I think, during the rise of live streamers, because it was a male content creator using a female Lolly avatar that, last I checked, never broke past the 150,000 mark. In fact, I think he has fewer subscribers than you at this point. He's yeah, not to say that you have few subscribers at all, man. You've been really churning out the numbers, but he's definitely like where, especially in an era where it's notable for Gargura to beat Kizuna Ai to the 3 million mark. Like, him being stuck at the 100,000 follower range at this moment is relatively low on. It's definitely like makes him one of the lower end creators in the current era, right? Unfortunately,
yeah. Is that a gender thing, or just because like the trends passed him by?
I suspect it's highly due to the trends, actually. We'll be bringing this up later, especially in the discussion involving Niji Sanji. But male content creators on the Japanese side aren't necessarily doing too bad, and not even like male content creators using female avatars. The what was the term? Bobby Niki, I think. Either way, the gender ambiguous VTubers in general aren't necessarily doing badly. Niji Sanji especially is pretty rife with them in general. But Nojo Lolly in particular apparently was only in it because he liked to do 3D modeling. And in terms of like what we would consider like VTuber content creation, which is not too dissimilar from like YouTube content creation in general, that wasn't exactly his gig or his scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Like, if he's not in it for the streamer gig, then yeah.
Yeah. That's obvious not to say that male VTubers are, especially on the Western scene, is having an easy time of it. There's nobody in the million mark range yet. Although Kuzuha is probably on pace to get to that point eventually. Let's see. Oh, Gogbe has mentioned that Niji Sanji has an openly non-binary person in Melissa, and I think they have more than one, honestly. Other than the like non-human representatives, there's also Ryushin, who strictly speaking shouldn't be referenced as male or female.
Interesting. Is that the Japanese Niji Sanji or the Western? They opened a Western branch recently, didn't they?
Yes, they've released two waves in a short subsequent order, but they've all been female and female presenting content creators so far. Whether or not they will be showing a non-binary creator on their Western branch will obviously be up to like who they fancy to recruit. But definitely, there's a lot more acceptance of that on the Eastern side than you might have like started out expecting, right? Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that ties into sort of shonen culture and like that whole like the gender ambiguity that's present in anime culture sometimes.
Yeah, and you know, there's literally been like about a decade and a half of 4chan jokes of wanting to be a little girl. That's unfortunately, especially when we're talking about the explosion of VTubers during the pandemic era. I hate to say it, but 4chan is part of the discussion. Let me see. I'm not sure if I have the slide in there. Before the pandemic actually hit, there was a minor blow up in Western attention on VTubers. For reasons probably not necessarily the most reputable. This was about the time that the agency era really started to kick off. Close this and turn that on. Which is when Tokino Sora and launched with Hololive and Tsukino Bito with Niji Sanji. But Hololive's zeroth generation, their original like batch of content creators, came to Western attention because they started playing GTA 5 for some reason. And you know that scene with the banter and what was it? It was, I'm not sure if I have her image on here. No, I don't. Damn it, I forgot to put that on. But yeah, 4chan quickly latched onto the VTuber culture because they were interacting as live streamers. They were talking to even their foreign fans, and their foreign fans were baiting them into repeating
dirty phrases,
lines of dialogue with slurs. It's GTA 5, so obviously urban culture, especially Afro-American linguistics, plays a major role in that. And as you can imagine, tricking the girls into saying the N-word was a popular pastime for a certain type of neckbeard.
Yeah, they would, wouldn't they? They would do that. Right. Yeah, I can see how that would generate attention in the West.
Yeah. This also coincided with a phase state transition and what it meant to be a VTuber as well. When we're talking about the Kizuna Ai era during 2016, it was mostly like short, sub 5-minute clips, mostly of them dancing or singing. A lot of it was also like real world, like classic idol interactions, and that they would go to variety shows, they would hold concerts, but not a lot of live streaming yet. It was around the 2018-2019 era that things really started to kick off, right? And that was with the agencies Nijisanji and Hololive in particular, when they started to live stream, use live 2D and 3D avatars, although early on it was still 3D, to hold live stream broadcasts and live stream content creation, right? Infamously with Hololive, that started off as a really, really minor scene in the overall like scope of VTubers, with Tokido Sora only starting off with like 13 viewers at a time. Now, obviously, she doesn't only get 13 viewers anymore.
No, more like what, 30,000 on a stream or something like that?
Especially during concerts, yes. Although regular day-to-day streams usually like maxing out in the thousands is still ridiculous numbers, right? But yeah, definitely like 30,000 for a singular stream is usually during a major event. Although these days 30,000 is low for a major event unless you're like a minor league agency. But yeah, Nijisanji especially, as Gokbake mentioned, Nijisanji was the agency that really started to popularize using like cheap live 2D avatars, or at least relatively cheap, instead of like 3D models. And this was the point where motion capture technology and live streaming technology got cheap enough to the point where, as long as you're willing to pay a couple $1,000 for an art commission and the rigging, you can effectively be an indie level content creator as a VTuber without having like a whole agency to support you. Basically the point where it started being affordable.
Which I imagine for the agencies also made it easier to populate like large rosters of creators like that.
Yep. Infamously, Nijisanji doesn't have a base salary for their content creators, I believe.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Unionize the VTubing industry.
Definitely they've had a lot of turnover because of that. I'm sure there are plenty of clips of Nijisanji. No, I know there are plenty of clips of Nijisanji creators, especially, talking about how the pay is split between the agency, the creators, and YouTube, right? For Super Chat's like a 30-30-30 deal. And
yeah, YouTube takes 30% of everything that goes through their platform.
Yep.
So if the agency takes another 30 out of that, then that's not a lot for the person who's actually creating the value.
Yep. Although I have also heard that the deals for their voice packs, merchandise, and everything else tend to be significantly better for the VTuber. But that's kind of obvious. Yeah. If you cut YouTube out of the deal, of course it's going to be better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get rid of one middleman, and the other middleman will split a little bit more with you.
Yeah. Now, you actually have... Now, obviously, looking at myself, I've obviously put some effort into developing a live 2D model and talking to the artists and riggers and everything, but you actually have direct experience with the rigging side of things, right? So I imagine you actually have a pretty good idea of the process that goes into making the avatar itself. I would like to know, like, your opinion about the difficulty involved, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends. Like, part of the reason why my little avatar here looks the way he does is because minimal amounts of moving parts, very simple sort of graphical look, limited in what he can do. Like, I can shake my head. That's sort of kind of move my eyebrows, but that also makes it very easy to resize him. Like some of the more complicated VTuber avatars that I've seen, if you squash them down too small on the screen, they just become like a blob of details. Like that's sort of, I kept it very simple because I was working with a very limited budget, and I have this I have this visual iconography already that I've sort of accidentally developed for the channel. Yeah, there you go. Where you lose a lot of detail where you go small. But even this little thing right here, like there's a lot of rigging that goes into just making this thing move, because it's not just about telling the program, oh, here's the mouth, just make that move. It's also about how much should the mouth move, how far should it open, like how sensitive should it be to my movements, like how much should it smoothen out. Like, because when I shake my head side to side, the model is not like the models we use aren't moving at exactly the same rate that we are. They smooth out the motion with motion tweening and with what's it called, interpolation. And like all of that is actually, like, I've checked out some of the more recent VTubing rig makers and stuff like that, and they've done a lot to simplify the process to the point where a layman could probably learn it, but like it is still a relatively complicated thing, especially if you want like the hair to be moving, if you have like an accessory like a bow that needs to be moving, if you want like the arms to be able to shuffle around, like if you want the shoulders to move independently of the way that the chest, and if you want titty bouncing, of course, like that needs to be programmed too.
Yeah, especially for the female side, the women content creators in the scene especially, they put a lot of details into stuff that I would have not thought that they would necessarily want to put details on. But you know what? More power to them. And like in my own experience with commissioning my own avatar and everything else, like the rigging can be just as complicated, time-consuming, and obviously expensive as the art side of things, which is what most people pay attention to. And making it simple is nice. If you go check out content creators like Pikami and others using more like cartoonish avatars, you can tell that it doesn't necessarily need to be the most complex avatar to be engaging or even lifelike. And a lot of the heavy lifting is done by programs like VTube Studio, whose recent PC release did a lot of efforts, did a lot to like lower the barrier even further for content creators. But still, the rigging part, even though people don't necessarily appreciate it quite as much, it's definitely a highly, both equally as important as the art and also highly underappreciated because of how like relatively invisible it is until you see bad rigging in action.
Yeah, and that's the same problem that you see in like ordinary character animation, is that everyone talks about, oh my god, it's like the animator is so good and the animation is so great, but like unless the rigger has been there to create all of the bones, all of the little like control points, all of the dependencies, like the dependencies are the big thing, which doesn't come into play so much with like live 2D models, but dependencies in terms of like if you have an arm and you have to tell the rig that when like the arm flexes in one way, flexing has to happen in certain other parts of the muscle as well, like certain parts of the model have to move in conjunction with each other because that's just how anatomy works. Like that all gets extremely complicated, and it's an incredibly specialized field. Like if you watch a Disney movie, if you see any character, there will always be like there'll be a lead animator, but there will be a rigger, there will be a model designer, there will be sculptors. Like there will be so many people involved in just making the thing exist for the animator to move it around, that like it kind of boggles the mind when you actually look at how many people it takes just to get like one Disney character to be able to move on screen.
Yeah, which also just makes
and
it
it's the
even
same
more
thing for like VTubing.
Yeah, and it also makes it even more remarkable for VTubers that in most cases, in fact about 99% of the cases I know of, there's only one rigger behind every single model, if not multiple models.
Yeah.
So like that's a sweaty amount of work. That's an exhausting amount of work just to think about. To get back on topic though, this is we're talking about rigging because this is roughly the point where Nijisashi gets in. They start to normalize the usage of a flat 2D, live 2D avatars rather than 3D avatars for content creators. And they not only did this make it a lot more accessible and a lot more feasible to be running agencies of 100 plus content creators, but they did it just in time as the overall scene was moving into the pandemic era, as I would like to call it. By far the most important part of the pandemic era in terms of content creators, I would definitely say would be the now retired Kiryu Koko of Hololive, who was one of the most well-known bilingual content creators, probably the most active in terms of courting both a Western and Eastern audience. Chat's going off. The queen of bilingual.
Yeah, there's a lot of love for Coco. Like even I noticed it when she was graduated. I was about to say retired, but that's not what they call it.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the holdovers from the idol culture that was present even all the way during the earliest stages of the Kyusuna I era, right? We use graduation to talk about moving on from the agency and from the creator group, and even Nija Sanji, who strictly speaking only has a handful of like dedicated idols in their group, if not only like less than 6, honestly, would still call it a graduation, just because that would be what you call an idol moving on. Kaicho graduating was definitely a massive blow to the community, and just in terms of like how everybody felt about it, because it felt very much like she was leaving at the peak of her influence, right? Like over the past year, because she debuted in like December 2019, I believe, like just before everything started going on lockdown. And during the time she was an active content creator, she did pretty much everything she could to develop a Western audience as well as the Eastern one, partially pragmatically, because if I recall correctly, her Japanese was not very strong at the start of her career. She was, per the lore, an immigrant from U.S. Dragon America, and especially for the Georgia region. And
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Dragon America.
U.S. Dragon America. USDA with USDA attributes, and more ways than one. USDA being the grading agency for American beef.
Yeah, it's like I can tell that there's a lot of meat on their bones, especially up top.
Yeah. It's also been said that she was the biggest proponent for having an English Hololive branch long before that was actually a company go, and we've seen how influential that proved to be. Holy shit.
Someone in chat says she was a big titty dragon with a country American accent and a Mickey Mouse voice. That okay? Yeah. I begin to see the appeal. At least on the surface.
She didn't act like anybody else in the agency. She didn't behave like anybody else in the agency. She got along, especially with the more, let's call them avant-garde creators in the Japanese scene. The most notable being Tamaki, which is an independent content creator made by a doujin artist. I forgot her name. Although Tamaki himself is supposed to be a guy. And her hygiene streams, Coco's hygiene streams with Tamaki are stuff of legends. Because even if nothing was shown, hearing a girl yelp because the laser she was using was burning the pubes off of her. It's definitely not something that anybody else would...
Go back a second. Go back. Burning the what off her?
The pubes off of her. Coco's shaving streams are famous for by far the least like idol-like behavior, the least like idol-like content you can imagine coming out of anybody from Hololive. And even as Hololive was like starting to develop a reputation of having like really off-the-wall content creators and behaviors, like nothing was quite like Coco, and nothing pushed the boundaries quite like Coco did.
Yeah, I can. Damn. Okay. So that's interesting because if VTubers emerged out of idol culture, my primary knowledge of idol culture is that it's heavily infested with purity culture as well. Like it's heavily sort of censoring exactly how much idol is allowed to express themselves as a sexual person, rather they have to live up to this like impossible standard. So like that sounds like very much like breaking some taboos, like in more ways than just like getting your pubes lasered on stream.
Like, for the longest while, that was pretty much like Hololive's reputation. Other than the fact that they would have like a succubus do ASMR, right? It never actually crossed the line into like outright erotic material. At least nothing hardcore. And then Coco just kind of like crashed through all the barriers like a big old dragon out of control. Let's see.
Damn.
Dude Wilhelm also mentioned, arguably, maybe Hachama pushed the envelope like Coco too. And that is a good point to note. I'm pretty sure you see me tweet on alternate accounts about like Akai Hato's content creation during the 2020 era as well, especially in terms of the horror material she would be producing at a time. But to specify, that was very much in the 2020 era, and due to the characterization slip that Hachama underwent during that time when she was being locked down in Australia due to the pandemic. This was famously somebody that was supposed to be like a really stereotypical tsundere character in the old anime style, really old school anime style, that slowly lost their grasp on sanity, as seen on live stream, cooking the most bizarre foods, making content involving self-beheading, clone torture, and other really scary nonsense, to be frank. And it turns out this was always what the girl was like behind the mask. I think the pandemic era especially was a major turning point for the VTuber agency. Not simply because Coco started being involved, and not simply because Hacham was stuck in Australia with Australian themes, but like in general, like the fact that everybody was locked down for long periods of time with nothing else to do. With nothing they can do like in their own physical spaces, meant that they spent a lot of time online, both as content creators and as consumers of content, right? I'm sure you have your own experience with that side of things and content creation as well.
Yeah. So basically, they got hit with pandemic derangement at exactly the moment when being a little bit pandemic deranged made it marketable. Yep. Like, was marketable to an audience that was also pandemic deranged.
Yep. Prior to 2020, it was not actually all that common for VTubers to be streaming more than 1 to 2 hours at once, especially agency VTubers. I think Ninja Scientist Kanai actually mentioned this, male content creator, probably like the second biggest at the moment, that it was actually unusual for him, it was actually seen as unusual for him to be doing his 9-hour plus streams. But over the course of the pandemic, especially with Corona as the like standing example of endurance streams, with her like 20-hour plus old school gaming.
Oh
streams.
Jesus!
Yeah, she doesn't sleep. I'm not sure when she ever actually sleeps.
God, I hope she's under 30, because like that sounds terrifying to me.
I kind of hope so too. She eventually does crash and like. The whole thing about Corona is that she will, as soon as she gets to a game, she refuses to stop playing until she actually like beats it to a level of satisfaction of her own, right? And her managers had to intervene a couple times. Oh yeah, as Leanne Feldman points out, she streamed Assassin's Creed Valhalla for 30 plus hours.
Yeah, that's not good.
No,
that's not healthy. I hope she's okay.
I can't really encourage it, but yeah, the pandemic era for VTubers wasn't just that people were watching a lot more VTubers because they had nothing else going on in their lives. It was also because VTubers themselves, as like actual people, couldn't do anything else except stay online. And unfortunately, this is also like
a major reason. That's something that's true of like content creation. Like, I know this is a YouTube creator. Like, I started a shorts channel a little while back because YouTube launched their shorts, like their TikTok competitors. Like, okay, fine, I make some 1-minute videos. And it turns out, like, something that's always true is if you upload every day, like if you're just there all the time, algorithms like that. They like when there's a thing, oh, this thing is consistently happening all the time. Well, that's lots of data for me to work with, so I can recommend it to exactly the kinds of people who would find it interesting. And so, like, my shorts channel blew up kind of. It's like on 60,000 subscribers now. And I started in like February, which is crazy, which is insane, but that's kind of part of the power of if there's just something new every single day. Like algorithms like that. Algorithms really like that. And if like all the VTubers were doing like starting to do much longer streams and they were like always on, I can see why that would be like part of an algorithmic boost to the thing on top of everything else.
Yeah. And it's not just algorithmically too, right? It's also like a parasocial factor where like you can't hang out with your friends, but you can hang out with this VTuber. And actually, this is a point I wanted to bring up actually, because I'm not sure if parasocial is necessarily the right word. Because what a lot of the testimony we get from VTubers is that although the relationships between them and their audience isn't anything like an actual relationship between like two people, it was in fact like there was in fact like part of what sustained them through the pandemic was the fact that they had a regular community to bounce off, right? Like you have your Discord.
Yeah.
I have my 3,000 various social media feeds that honestly I should probably cut down on, but I have to use them for work now.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah, and even if you can't hang out with your friends, a lot of what filled that void was ultimately the social interactions they had with the community they built up, right? And also with the community of VTubers that they were working alongside. Like what would we call
so
that?
from their perspective, it's not so much a parasocial relationship as just a relationship.
Yeah, or at least like a virtualized community relationship, to fill the gaps of like what we were missing while we were all basically waiting for the vaccine to materialize. Thank God it's finally here.
Yeah, I got my first shot. I'm so fucking happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that that's still like it's still a parasocial relationship, but like at least in the way that I've experienced it, like the way that it goes is that once you have an audience that's sufficiently big enough, like because there is something called the Bakulan number, something like that. Specifically, it's the human brain is only wired to be able to sort of handle 150 to 200 specific social connections at a time. Like that's as many people as your brain is like able to know. And anything beyond that, it has to start amalgamating. It has to start grouping people into groups so that you know this group of people are like that, this group of people are like that. And the relationship that I know that I have with my audience is that I definitely have a parasocial relationship to my audience as a whole, but not really to any individual member of my audience. Like in my head, my audience is this one beast, this one huge animal that like swells and swells and grows and grows. That has certain characteristics. Like I know roughly what my audience is like what do they like, what do they care about, in what ways do they agree with me, in what ways do we disagree.
Yeah.
But I mostly don't know any individual person there, and that is a parasocial relationship from my perspective with the audience. In the same way that the audience has a relationship with me is that they understand me a lot as an individual character, but like that is a one-way relationship because I don't understand them as individual people.
Yeah. Now, obviously,
it's two one-way relationships that don't really intersect.
Yeah. Obviously, there'll be a couple like fringe cases, like names we see like show up on Discord all the time. People like that regularly reach out to contact with us. People eventually that make into mods, obviously, are notable exception to that.
I recognize names in the comments, of course, but you know.
And especially with the VTuber community, a lot of that especially gets blurred for the bilingual community or the clipping community, especially, right? Let's see. Let me go back to Pikami there. Pikami especially was also one of the major creators that blew up during the pandemic era, specifically because she was being clipped all the time speaking English, and that not only like, oh boy, we are a hive mind, Skyen. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I see them.
The Legion has been recognized, but Pikami especially was amongst the content creators that really benefited from being bilingual during the pandemic era, and that it was easy for a wider community to follow what she was doing, understand what she was saying, cheer on when she loses her cool and becomes a family unsafe streamer because a Mario game dicked her over. And that was also true for a lot of the other and that's true to a lesser extent for the the content creators that eventually like attracted bilingual clippers, especially. Hololive benefited immensely from the fact that there was an active community of multilingual clippers and translators hooking themselves onto Matsuri with Liger, for instance, or like I can't even keep track of how many Hololive clippers there are these days. It feels like there's a new channel every other week, but yeah, we've
the
actually
algorithm
had.
likes more.
Sorry, what was that?
The algorithm likes more, always more, never less,
Yes.
always more.
Yes, always more. Although algorithmically, this is actually a subject of controversy in that they don't necessarily like it when you clip things too early. Because apparently, what's happened to a Hololive before is that if clippers immediately clip something that's entertaining going on the channel, and then upload that clip with a really fast translation, it might actually bury the original video in terms of search results.
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, that apparently happened quite frequently early on, especially before they turned off community captions for some reason. Just because it takes more time to upload original captions and translations to form the video. But yeah, I know at least one instance where a clipper turned into a mod for the girl involved because he was such an ardent fan of her and regularly translated her content over. But as we've mentioned before, I think we've had a discussion 2 or 3 months ago about whether or not this counted as like unpaid labor on account of those agencies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the
Which is where, like, being the dirty socialist that I am, I would argue that, like, the clippers create a hell of a lot of value for this thing.
Oh,
and there comes a point where it's like, yeah, it's like there comes a point where you do have to have the conversation about, like, should they be getting paid for this, actually? Like, should they be allowed to monetize their clips with Patreon or something like that? Like, at least receive donations for their work.
And what I've seen is that the community is a bit weirdly reluctant to support paid clipping, at least in terms of Patreon and everything else, because there has been troubles before with like clippers taking things out of context, right, and causing drama by focusing on a few lines that seems as if they're dissing another content creator and causing like strife between like agencies, stuff like that. But
yeah, also
it kind of feels like there should be something like a TikTok Creators Fund program coming out of like Hololive and Niji Sanji, right?
Yeah, because it is this thing of like, would people like Korone have nearly as big of an audience, especially in the West, if not for clips with translations on them?
Yeah. So at the very least, there should be some kind of like verified system to demonstrate that these are like respected clippers that are working alongside the agency, like, and they should be paid. Like, literally, I don't think Hololive EN would be nearly as big as it is, or nearly as popular as it is, if there wasn't such an appetite for VTubers, especially Hololive school VTubers, due to clippers translating everything to the West the year before, right?
Yeah, and CS Dragon brings up a good point. Who would pay them though? That's kind of the sticky wicket there, because like the obvious thing would be to say, Hololive, you need to hire clippers because there's a huge demand for this stuff, and if you get some official clippers out, you can avoid on like people making drama out of stuff that maybe there should not be made drama out of. You can exert a little bit of like control over the VTubers image, but that's also giving the agency a bunch of more power over the thing. And there is this like this is always the thing about commercialization of fan works like this. I would say it's related to like the conversations around people who draw fan art of YouTubers, like, and who have Patreons where they take money for that stuff. It's like, if someone draws fan art of my avatar and they monetize that in some way online, that's kind of the same conversation. It's like, I own that IP technically, and I didn't consent to this representation, but it's fan works. It's like, it's a complicated, difficult thing, and which is where, like, I'd say, like, at least let them have tip jars, and then people can reward the best clippers with, you know, rewards for doing good work. But, you know, it's a difficult thing structurally. What we really should do is just abolish capitalism as a whole and like give everybody all the money that they need to live, so people can just clip for free without needing to be paid for their labor, because labor is not a thing that you need to survive anymore. That would be great. But that's a different conversation.
UBI would definitely make things a lot less like ethically strife. But
Yeah, it really would. This is why you should be a communist. Give you more clips of your favorite VTubers.
Listen. You know me. I am fully in favor of gay space luxury capitalism, communism, not capitalism, communism, gay space luxury communism. Like as soon as as soon as our value and dignity are separated from the need to incessantly create capital, that'd be great, and it wouldn't be any trouble anymore just to have a whole bunch of like hobbyist clippers going after the content creators and clipping everything. But in the current status quo, unfortunately, this was one of the dark sides of the pandemic era, and that the magnified parasocial relationships also had a lot of negative sides in terms of the controversy surrounding clippers, surrounding the communities, and everything else. And I'm especially talking about the issues involving HoloLive during their China blowouts in mid 2020, regarding the streamers mentioning Taiwan in various clips.
Oh yeah, that happened. I remember that. That was one of those things that blew up enough that it sort of entered my radar as well.
Yeah, it entered everybody's radar because it wasn't just like the VTuber scene. It was the overall cultural clash between Chinese nationalists and what seemed to be at least on my end, from my point of view, literally everybody else in the world. But specific to the VTuber scene, what we saw was that the relatively offhand treatment of clippers from HoloLive and Niji Sanji meant that the clippers themselves, if they were to sufficiently like centralize themselves as a central power, could try and arguably fail, but definitely tried to hold the Chinese community hostage in terms of clipping, right? It used to be called HoloLive Moments was the big one. They had even in the West near monopoly on the really like high profile clips and high profile moments, and they complained severely that the Chinese branch of HoloLive, or whatever agency that HoloLive was partnering with to operate in China, Bilibili, was basically demanding that they make translations without offering any compensation. Now, in terms of like compensating people for their labor, absolutely, they should have been paid to or like compensated to some extent. In terms of holding a community hostage for geopolitical reasons, though, that's significantly more sketch.
Yeah. I mean, the issue with Taiwan is the third rail for like anything that comes for Chinese foreign policy, isn't it? It's like you step on it and you die.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm probably risking some feedback by mentioning it about Vtubers on a searchable platform as well, but fuck them. But yeah, I definitely have two minds about that. I definitely feel like, as the situation is right now, in terms like none of the girls has to be involved in the clipping situation or clipping dramas, right? Or compensated labor dramas. But also because of how capitalism structure things, I think these kind of conflicts are also like pretty much unavoidable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of why I like the idea of like a agency sponsored like creator fund for clippers, because Gar grew at 3 million, and their new V singer Iris reaching 500,000 subscribers within a week of her debut. That's a lot of value. That's a lot of value that isn't necessarily like
fun.
Yeah, it's hard to say that this is stuff that this is value that they've generated internally. This is definitely because of the overall community presence, a lot of which wasn't like internally developed. It wasn't like deliberate marketing efforts on part of HoloLive Corporation or Cover Corp, their parent corporation, deliberately formulating a marketing plan involving like hundreds of clipping channels, translating it for a Western audience, and then capitalizing on the attention that they themselves generated. Right? It's very much like the community itself deciding that this is something that they want to bring to the attention of everybody else that they know, and therefore HoloLive benefited.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the thing that's kind of amazing about VTubers is the level of not just like personal dedication that they get from their fans, but the dedication to sharing. which is one of the things that I found really remarkable about them is like how dedicated people who are fans of VTubers really want you to know about their favorite VTubers. They really like talking about them. They really enjoy bringing them up and saying, "Oh yeah, that's so cute, so cool," and that's something I find is quite unique to VTubers. Like I don't see that like even with really popular YouTubers like Game Grumps back when they were at their highest. Like you didn't really get that level of sharing dedication.
Yeah. What that reminds me of heavily is pre-YouTube days for anime fans, where to be a weeb especially, you're basically watching, at least on my end as an American, like PBS at the dead of night with like old school Neon Justice Evangelion episodes with like yellow blocked text and people literally sharing like VHS tapes with each other, right? Like this was very much a passion project for people, sharing things that they love with each other without necessarily a whole lot of corporate backing.
Yeah,
and
which
now
is fascinating. But what is it about VTubers that makes people get that? Because like because I remember also being like an anime like as a 13-year-old discovering Dragon Ball and One Piece for the first time, you know, and very much trying to get my friends into it, and they were like, it's cartoons for children, but like that shit. So like I can definitely relate to that bit, but there's not really that scarcity in the same way with VTubers. Like VTubers are fucking everywhere. You can watch them anytime you want, unlike Neon Genesis Evangelion for most of its lifetime. So what is it about them that makes them so like I need my friends to see this shit?
So at least before the blow up in the Western scene, I would argue that there is some level of scarcity in terms of the availability of like translating material, right? Like the dissonance of having like a cute anime girl talking about completely ridiculous things translated to English, and knowing that behind the anime, behind the person isn't a script and isn't like a voice actress, at least not in terms of like a professional voice actress that we would think of, but just like some teenager with an avatar talking about their lives in Japan and talking about especially the parts that would not necessarily be discussed because they're not wearing a mask and because they're not like showing their own actual selves, was in fact relatively scarce. That's not necessarily as true now, but it definitely was like the seed of like how interesting it was for this batch of weebs paying attention to like the Japanese streaming scene, right?
Yeah.
And on the content creator side, Nanners and V Shoujo talked about it and various articles as well, some of which I may or may not have been involved with. Cough. But they talk about, especially, well, not even Nanners, but Iron Mouse has talked about how it's a lot easier for her to be a VTuber than to be a conventional streamer or content creator, right? Because being a VTuber, you're not necessarily physically limited, whether by your appearance or by your physical capability. And we know, because she's talked about, that Iron Mouse in particular suffers some kind of autoimmune issue that prevents her from going out and doing normal things. So, on the content creator side, it's a lot easier to act out. And let me go back to the one of the previous slides especially. We've talked about a significant amount about Hololive in particular, because Hololive was the first major presence in the Western scene thanks to the clipping community. But a lot of Hololive's influence also comes from their nominal rivals and Niji Sanji, led in particular by Tsukino Mito, right? Now, given this design, it's just a really, really normal anime schoolgirl, probably like a present type with a really like the standard like long traditional hair, falls within dress code if the miniskirt's a little too short for conventional dress codes, of course. But Tsukino Mito is not famous for being a pure type of content creator, right? She's definitely no idol. When we're talking about Tsukino Mito, we're talking about a girl that showed up on April 1st of her stream with the promise of a guest VTuber in her stream, but what she actually showed was live footage of her room with somebody in a cosplay of herself wearing a really creepy Kigurumi mask of her, just standing there and doing really bizarre things. And then we're also talking about the same content creator that professed her love for the Human Centipede series of films. And then we
Well,
also
no
talk about same
accounting for
content.
taste.
Yeah. And then we also talk about same content creator that would be playing like boys love visual novels on stream, using her own avatar to censor the less work safe parts. Niji Sanji did not kick off as an idol style agency, or what we call like a seiso style, like pure type of characteristics where you're playing to a crowd to play as nice as possible. Rather, their very first and so far biggest content creator is best known for using full advantage of her VTuber avatar to do completely degenerate shit she would otherwise never do in real life, and to talk about things she would not never talk about with people around her in real life. And not only is that appealing to a certain type of content creator that would otherwise be risking a lot by showing their real face, it's also the sort of things that real life content creators would not normally be talking about on stream anyhow, but which people of course love to hear, because in the end, well, people tend to be a little degenerate, more so than they would otherwise publicly admit to.
Yeah. So it's like it's the way that like, and certainly this is I mean, this is partly true of myself as well, is that I've made the conscious decision not to use my face as part of my content creation, just because I don't want to be famous, especially. But there is also that little separation of relative anonymity, where it is a little freeing. Like, it does feel like you're a little free to be a little bit more open or blunt in some cases.
Yeah, and also talk about things that you might necessarily not want anybody that you actually know or talk to on a day-to-day basis to know about, lest you never be able to look them in the eye again, right? I would say that if you're asking about what makes VTubers in particular so attractive to the audience in general, with or without the pandemic in consideration, I would definitely say that there's a side of humanity that they're able to indulge in that actually being a real life human on screen, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get away with. Probably the most infamous examples would be Matsuri from Hololive, who is perhaps a little too frank about her sexuality, and is a little too willing to discuss her various mishaps as a teenage girl growing up, and everything that's surrounding that. I think I talked about you during our planning stage. Probably one of my favorite moments coming out of Niji Sanji was a deep discussion into the LGBT dating scene, done by a certain, let me bring up that slide. Done by Gundo Mirai, who does a lot, who probably risks a lot more than most VTubers do, simply by the fact that apparently her VTuber avatar is nominally based on her real life, and that both in avatar and in real life, she is in fact a school teacher, an LGBT school teacher that has discussed extensively her fetishes and her dating life as a lesbian in Japan. And apparently there has been at least one case where her students have guessed that their teacher may in fact be a VTuber, much to her embarrassment.
Oh. Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know all that much about the education system in Japan, but I do know that, again, it's a place where there's a lot of puritanism that reigns.
Yeah. Definitely she's risking her job by doing so, I would say. Japanese education in most places tends to be socially conservative to the extreme, right? We're talking about like full guidances on like what you wear, what your hairstyle is like, what color your hair can be. And then there's this school teacher coming out talking about how it's hard to find somebody to date, hard to find a woman to date in her local community because everybody's already dated everybody else and slept with everybody else along the way.
Yeah.
That's just a little.
I did see a TikTok. I did see a video from lesbian TikTok. It was like, someone asked me if wouldn't it be awkward if you had to hang out with everyone you'd ever slept with, and she was like, no, that's just called a lesbian wedding.
Yeah. Given how tight knit the communities are, that is both hilarious and also extremely true. And I can only assume this is doubly that is doubly so for the Japanese LGBT community, where it's much harder to be out unless you happen to be in the more risque parts of Tokyo, right? And the social scene's all there. But like,
Yeah.
anywhere else on the island, in the island country, I imagine it'd be significantly harder to be out and about and finding people with similar like tastes.
Yeah. And that's interesting. Like, yeah, again, that's the thing about the mask is like gets people to talk about things that you'd otherwise never hear about.
Yep. Yeah, fundamentally, I think that's the most important part about understanding the VTuber appeal, and that sure there are people that tend to overshare with their own like personal faces on YouTube and on Twitch and everything else. But even as they overshare, they only really overshare like one specific aspect of their like personal lives, right? The stuff that they think they can get away with as a public figure or content creator. The ones that tend to go over a certain line, past their own comfort, especially for issues that can get them doxxed or in legal trouble, tend not to last very long.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that VTubers don't get doxxed. In fact, quite often there is concentrated effort to get them doxxed, especially from 4chan, from Kiwi Farms, and from all the other shit stains on the internet.
Fucking Kiwi Farms. Fuck that shit. Fuck that fucking place. Fuck the people who hang out there.
Yeah.
Fuck that bullshit. Hate that place.
I'm not saying they should be hunted down like animals, but I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm going to stop anybody from doing so.
At least their servers should be burned to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Period. If not burnt to the ground, at least like, well, before even the servers, the server protections, the people that enable them, should really get a talking to, in multiple levels. But not to like push the point too much, but the sense of the fact that you can play a character and drop that character pretty much at will is not only what makes VTubing like attractive to a content creator, especially the more like repressive their social circles are, right? But also allows them to produce materials that are attractive to the audience and makes the audience like forms a more intimate sense of humanity with the audience, right? Like when you see like content creators talk about their sex lives, they're either like a dedicated channel specific to that purpose, or a blog that nobody's actually paying attention to, or that particular video gets soon deleted because, especially if you're like a high profile like woman content creator, like any of them really, that's material you definitely don't want to be laying around with your name attached to it. But
yeah, because there can be all kinds of consequences.
Yeah,
I do want to respond to someone in chat. Internet dude Wilhelm. If those servers go down, won't the scum infest news sites? Yes, they will. But the important thing is they're going to be much less effective, and they're going to have a much harder time reorganizing their harassment scene. Like, because every time you shut down those servers, people do like try and build a new place and go there. And if you let that shit fester for long enough, it can build up to a new hive. But every time you break one of those hives, every time you break up one of those communities, you weaken them. You weaken them substantially. You weaken their ability to organize, their ability to fundraise, their ability to draw in more people, could pull them into the rabbit hole of like the alt-right pipeline or whatever they like. When you burn down a place like Kiwi Farms, yes, the scum can come back, but it takes them a long time and it takes them a lot of resources. And in the meantime, people are a lot safer. So just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, the subsequent communities, when you destroy a rat's nest like that, are not just smaller but weaker and have fewer resources. You leave a place like Kiwi Farms around, they not only attract more and more people and therefore have more leverage, they also tend to attract backers that can use them for political purposes. That's why you should destroy them.
Yeah, like Nazis love recruiting on 4chan. They love recruiting on Kiwi Farms.
Yeah, it's
because that's where they find people who are vulnerable to their propaganda.
And just like everybody else with half a brain cell, they know that's a numbers game. So you reduce those numbers, you give them fewer chances.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, that's outside of the scope of this discussion stream. So
yeah,
let's move on from that.
Yeah, let me see. We were just discussing the mask issue. Oh yeah, speaking of the mask issue, one of the most controversial points to bring up about VTubers is the crossover with sex work in particular. Most famously with Project Melody on part of VShojo. In fact, she is the founding member, as I understand it. The VShojo project was not just the gun run and Mountain Dew's idea, but also partially her brainchild, in that she was by far the biggest influencer they brought in the first place. I don't think either of us have any issues with sex workers in general, right?
No, sex work is work. It's just labor. It needs to be protected in the same ways. But so she specifically is essentially a hentai VTuber, I suppose?
Yeah.
Does she create sexual content around her own avatar, or is it more like talking sexy shit?
Her avatar and talking. As I understand, she was Chatterbait's first virtual content creator, and caused a lot of controversy from doing so. Mostly because she's also the only content creator on that platform that wasn't using her own face, right? And therefore, there was some resentment about the fact that she wasn't taking nearly as much risk as the other ones on the platform, which, is kind of fair. But on the other hand, bump the timeline back like 2 or 3 years and tell everyone at Chatterbait that they can use like 3D virtual avatars like that and still make money. And I'm going to guess that most of them are going to take the offer, right? Rather than use their own faces and risk their own real life reputation.
Yeah, like the risks that sex workers take just to do the things that they do. Like I know a few sex workers who I've talked to, and like the amount of harassment that they get from the police, the amount of harassment that they can get from like credit card companies that refuse to issue them credit cards because you might use that credit card for air quotes pimping. Like the shit that they go through just because they haven't done anything illegal. They just sit in their room and they like masturbate on a camera. But the shit they go through in terms of having difficulty finding a bank, having difficulty getting apartments, having difficulty getting loans if they need anything, like even like insurance will refuse to cover sex workers because they engage in risk-taking behavior. Like fucking no, it's masturbating in their rooms. Everyone does that. It's like, but yeah, so like if you can have a 3D avatar and kind of cover up, like get that layer of anonymity, I don't see any reason not to.
Yeah, and probably saves a lot of effort with dealing with PayPal as well to have somebody else be managing all the cash.
Oh, fucking PayPal, yeah.
Fucking PayPal and Patreon, especially when Patreon started cracking down on sex workers as well. And honestly, we're kind of
now OnlyFans is talking about banning sex work from their fucking platform. OnlyFans is talking about it.
Use that platform in the first place.
Yeah, and the reason why they're doing it is because they can't get any fucking VC funding so long as they are associated with sex work.
So
because the fucking venture capitalists are Puritans.
I mean, it's not as if they're having server issues without like major VC funding in the first place. But also, the reason why I bring this up is that there is in fact a long history like crossover between like aerotubing and VTubers in general, right? Like we're talking about Project Melody as the most public face of it in the West, but as like we were both surprised to learn that around December of last year there was a VTuber by the name of Asahino Meryl that was apparently caught a film. Let's not beat around the bush. It seemed at the time that she was getting porked on YouTube, on a YouTube live stream. Now, as I understand later, this was actually just an ASMR thing she does on the regular, but did get her channel banned. At least that specific channel banned. She apparently has a new one up.
It was not something on camera, but like you could hear the thing happening ostensibly.
Yes, it was basically erotic ASMR, which, to be fair, it's not only old hat for VTubers, it's extremely old hat for YouTube in general, right? Like, it's definitely.
The ASMR communities, like, they skirt the very edges of what the community terms of service in terms of the kind of content that they make, and a lot of it is heavily erotically tinged, especially all the hypnosis stuff. Holy shit.
Yeah. Nothing about what she was doing was new, except that the Western VTuber community caught the attention of it and drove a lot of traffic to her and forced YouTube's algorithms to pay attention to it. Now, this has actually been a situation that's plagued VTubers in general, in that any slightly risque stuff, down to just like the suggestion of boobs on stream, will occasionally run a red flag with the algorithm. And especially since they are in fact animated avatars, it seems as if a lot of the content tends to be flagged in the same category as kid-friendly material. So as you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean that's actually multiple times when I've watched a VTuber clip on YouTube, the recommendations bar out on the right is just all children's songs and cartoon clips.
Yeah.
Like all the way down, because the algorithm goes, "Oh, that's a cartoon avatar. Cartoons are for kids." So
Yeah.
I really fucking hope that I hope there's not too many children being raised on accidentally getting served a bunch of VTubers talking about their sex toys.
Yeah. Especially
Because
how
parents
common
just
that
shove an
is.
iPad in a kid's hand and leave them.
Yeah. What is it? Speaking of sex toys, a lot of that is increasingly common with Niji-sanji's English branch. And I would say that they're merely following in the footsteps of their Japanese counterparts and being as blunt about things like that. But definitely like Finana from Hololive's first English wave. No, not Hololive. Niji-sanji's first English wave. The Lazuli group. Infamously lets slip a lot about her tastes in general. And although she isn't nearly as risque as habitually risque as a lot of her peers, Niji-sanji as a whole tends to be really, really open about things like that. Perhaps to her detriment though, because I'm not sure the English community is nearly as is. Despite the West supposedly being a lot more liberating about things like that, they also tend to have a stick up their ass about discussion points like that, right? Like,
the Puritanism is real. It's real.
Especially with the American audience for obvious reasons. Given that the Europeans kicked out all the Puritans and left us with them. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, I mean, America, if you believe the American founding myth, America was founded by people who were set such a huge stick up their ass the British couldn't deal with them. So, explains a lot about American culture.
Yeah, as root and foundation. Now, despite Hololive having a reputation for more say-so and more idol-like behaviors and activities, though, I would say that regardless if it's Niji-sanji or Hololive, a lot of their stuff is arguably sex work. We're not just talking about ASMR, right? We're not talking about just like erotic roleplay or things like that. We're also just talking about their willingness to discuss issues of sex, to discuss issues of sexuality and eroticism, and none more to the case than Captain Hosho Marine herself, whose most infamous clip of all is her going on a 3D live stream with her friend Kiriko and saying, "I'm horny."
I mean, that's honest.
Yeah, excessively honest. Talking about her bedroom hijinks on stream is is way beyond the pale for any scene, any region, any culture. But the pirate queen herself is, as my chat is currently demonstrating, well known and well beloved for being by far the most hypersexual streamer without actually doing explicit erotic content.
Yeah.
Unless of course you count.
And there is a sliding scale there, I think. Sex work always is a sliding scale. You're getting massage. Where do they have to touch you before it's sex work, right? There's always that sliding scale of it. And I would say even if it's just someone who's being very, very frank about their sexuality on stream, that can, in some cases, that kind of rubs up against sex work, frankly.
Yeah. So would you count?
Because it sort of appeals to the same pleasure.
Would you count a live stream without actually showing anything in real life, but of two girls sharing a shower and commentating on their physical assets, sex work?
That could, yeah. I mean, because you're creating a fantasy. If you wrote that out as fiction, that would be considered erotic fiction.
And what if it wasn't fiction? Because that happened recently, actually. Apparently, they lost a bet. So there was a stream of the Hololive girls sharing a bath, and of course it was Marine.
Oh boy!
Of course it was Marine.
Yeah.
You can't see it, but I face
pointed out
right
correctly
now
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone in chat pointed out that we're kind of forgetting to talk about the characters, and it's because this discussion is so fascinating. But looking at Marine here, that's the thing I noted is a lot of the VTube character designs, like there tends to be big titty and cleavage and like bare midriffs, and like as you pointed out, even with the good little schoolgirl thing, the skirt that's a bit too short. Like there's almost always an element of sexualization to the characters that I've seen, unless they are the ones that are specifically like, I'm very, 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 very cute, like in terms of their character design. And I think that's kind of interesting that it's like, it's not necessarily that you can look at a VTuber and go, oh, that's definitely like a super horny sex VTuber. And sometimes, like, I would imagine also there's cases where a really horny character design actually has a pilot that's kind of wholesome and not too dirty-minded.
Yeah, and also behavior-wise, it's kind of ironic, but Project Melody is probably the purest one of the Bishoujo group in terms of behavior.
She's the sex worker?
She's the only one of them that actually does charity-based streams, but the other ones, if anything, are much, much filthier. But yeah.
But just don't actually do sex work about it. Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
And part of the reason
why, if I were to look at Marine, like and like look at the character design of this thing, I'd say, okay, this looks a little Dojin-ish. Like this looks like something you could get out of Fate, for example. Like one of those designs that are like, maybe this is Fate's version of Blackbeard, right? Where you take a character, you sort of reduce them down to, pirate, that means this kind of hat, big coat, thing around the neck with a brooch and an eye patch. Okay, pirate character. Now we made it a little bit sexy. Now we made it a little bit horny, but not necessarily explicitly pornographic. And like, yeah, like it looks like a horny design, but it doesn't look like a porn design. Yeah.
Although to be a bit of a what's the term? To be specific with Fate, Blackbeard in Fate is just a neckbeard. A skinny neckbeard at that. But she does have a lot of resemblances with Drake's design, Sir Francis Drake, which is obviously...
Oh, Sir Francis Drake. Okay. Yeah. Well, that was close then.
Yep, close, really close actually. And you do have a lot of interactions, but yeah, that's just be pedantic about that. We obviously go what you mean in terms of like how you would design an anime like pirate. This is pretty much a stereotype you would go with. Partially why I want to bring up sex work and sexy designs with VTubers especially is basically as a note that when you boil it down to like the basic tropes and everything else, there isn't actually all that much of a difference between sex work, the tropes and designs involved in sex work with idol culture really. Like when you boil it down to the fundamentals, a lot of the approaches to appeal on both are derived from the same like masculine heterosexual lens in the first place.
Yeah.
And infamously, sex work and idol culture, especially in Japan, doesn't actually have too many barriers between the two.
Yeah, I've heard about that, like paid dating and things like that sort of comes into it.
Yeah. Talking about the darker sides of idol culture, I'm sure there are much, much better sources than we are about the overall scene. But also in terms of how they're designed to appeal to the male gaze especially, and to appeal to the cultural expectations of what constitutes as sexy and what constitutes as attractive.
Yeah, they're all skinny. Like that's the thing I note is like even the ones that like when they're meant to be air quotes thick, it's mostly just they have curves.
Yeah.
Not so much that they're actually any version of plus sized at all. Which is the anime thing. Like that's a broader thing about anime aesthetics, where anime aesthetics are so fucking hostile to any kind of body, especially on women, especially on girls, that is not stick fucking thin.
Yeah, which is
so
actually
like,
ironic.
Yeah,
here.
so like they're
the irony here is that Marine's character is designed as a really stereotypically thin anime girl, but the actual person apparently does in fact qualify as thick, to the point where on stream when she's doing her 3D streams, it becomes obvious that her waist proportions don't exactly match her model, and that she'll have mysterious floating bits at times. Yeah, not to say that she is fat apparently, but she's definitely built more. Let's call them.
Yeah, I mean it's also the thing of like anime girls. No one is as thin as an anime girl. No one is. Yeah. Like unless you have like that's something that sometimes is important to drive home, especially when it comes to anime aesthetics. Is like no one is that thin. No one. You cannot be that thin. Oftentimes, anime girls are so thin there is not enough room for their livers and their spleen and their spleens and their fucking innards. Like it's not a question of they're just slender and in good shape. No. These body types are basically impossible, and that's I have seen a lot. Like. It is something that kind of worries me a little bit because I see a lot of like people who get upset that they can't get quite as slim and slender as they see in like anime and shit. Like, and it's no, this is a fantasy. This is impossible. This is physically impossible. Unless you have a magical wish-granting fairy, you can't do it. And even if the wish-granting fairy did make you that thin, you would probably die.
Yeah. And we can obviously argue that just because people are picking like attractive avatars to represent themselves, they are very much exacerbating the cultural influences there. Although,
yeah,
that's also like going to.
But I also think, like, in terms, especially if you work for an agency, I would imagine you don't necessarily get the option of anything else, because like you talk about, there is this expectation. Like, what does an anime girl look like? Well, she's thin. Yeah. She is thin.
She has
That's just the fucking way it goes.
She's either have too many assets or are just as flat as a board because of certain Japanese tastes that are perhaps a little too controversial and perhaps ill-advised to pursue.
Yeah.
But yeah. Although with Hololive, interestingly enough, especially with Nishi Sanji, there's apparently at least some level of like personal input in at least some of their models. I know, for instance, that it won't be with this coming up wave of Nishi Sanji content creators that they just had the female auditions for, because those models are already set in stone. But especially for Hoshimachi Suisei, for instance, her model predates Hololive in that she is the only one of the content creators that was an independent talent picked up by the agency and then transferred over to Hololive proper. So her model was her own personal design done by hand, but still a very, very classical like idol style model, right? Like blue performance dress, very much like the sort of thing you expect to see on stage, because that's very much like what she wanted to be and what she was influenced by.
Yeah, and that's something I should probably point out. Like, when we talk about character designs in terms of like when it gets discussed in terms of being empowering to women or whatever, it's important to note that like if you want to make your avatar can be literally whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
And no one gets to tell you that you're self-hating or whatever, because like, no, fuck that. Your avatar, your rules, do whatever you want. The criticism is when capital gets involved. Like when you have an agency, for example, of Hololive Vtubers who rake in millions and millions and millions, but they only produce like one body type, and they sort of interact with the broader thing of like the entire thing of beauty culture across capitalism, which is this thing of like they need to sell you insecurity so you'll purchase their products to deal with your insecurity. Like, you are ugly and you're not beautiful enough and your hair looks terrible and your skin is shit. Buy our creams, buy our hair products, buy our diet pills, buy our fucking like weight loss books and all. Like, you always, because capitalism always needs to be able to sell you another product, it can never tell you that you're good enough. It can't tell you that you are done, you have achieved the beauty ideal. The beauty ideal always has to move a little bit out of your reach, so you will buy another product in order to reach it. And that's the criticism, is that this is one tiny itty-bitty little piece of it. Not that it's evil or wrong to want to have a hot avatar for yourself.
The exception, of course, is if you happen to be like a self-affirmation counselor or self-affirmation lifestyle specialist. But that also kind of like snake oil salesman as well, because what they're trying to say is that you shouldn't want what you want, even if you do like personally have reasons to want that. And you should be buying their self-help guides instead to feel better about yourselves, which is just another way of making you feel inadequate. Yeah, but that's a whole like social discussion. To bring up another point, Dude Wilhelm mentioned that Suisei's first model was made by her and rigged by her, honestly, but her second wasn't. And that's because, well, frankly, Hololive has a lot more money to spend than Suisei does as a single content creator that frankly wasn't getting that many views before she joined the industry. And as I understand, though, she still had, she was still like heavily consulting what that second model ultimately ended up looking like, because it was still based on her first model as well, and ultimately it had to be something she's satisfied with. And I think that's also true for a lot of the girls when they get alternate costumes throughout the year. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's the authenticity thing, right? Like we talked about, like a lot of what gives VTubers their appeal is that there is this sense of, well, they have this anonymity which lets them be more authentic. So I would suppose that that also comes into the design process. Like if they have a design forced on them that they don't like, that could be bad for business.
Yeah, it's honestly just like hard to be appealing using an avatar that you personally don't feel represents you well or represents your interests and tastes well. Like I got really lucky with my artist in that she understood immediately when I said I wanted like an Arknight style like tech wear with transparencies and like a little bit like Eastern mysticism, especially around the hand wrappings and having like a Buddhist like prayer chain and everything else around that. Like my original sketch for what I look like now looks nothing like what's on screen right now, and I'm all the happier for that, because having a lesser artist try to fulfill a vision without like an understanding like of the media's on hand or like what the desired end result looked like would make it much harder to be using this on a long-term basis. And also just the fact that I spent like $800 on that project, on that part of the project alone, that would have been hard to adjust in general. So even if you're not personally paying for it, like with studio models, the fact that you're basically spending at least like, they're on contract to have a minimum of 3 streams a week. So you're spending at a minimum, on average, about 6+ hours a week in this form in public. You kind of have to want to like this to some extent. And certainly there are cultural influences there that are detrimental to your public image and everything. But also, especially with trans creators, not having a double dosage of body dysmorphia will probably be a good thing to have as a content creator in the long term.
Yeah. Are there any trans VTubers who are like open about being trans? Speaking of which, how about queerness? Because like again with the mask thing, you talked about like the one lesbian teacher who talked about her dating scene. Is that also an aspect of like VTubing in general? Is there a big queer presence there?
Oh, very much so. I actually forgot to bring up the image for these. So give me a real quick second to get the image assets for this. But Sukoya and Tomoe from Nijisanji especially are known to actually be dating in real life and happen to be queer content creators.
Cool.
Let's see. I guess we can just use fan art of this. It's not too complicated. But yeah, they both are infamous for their fetishes, but honestly, very sweet people in general. At least that's the persona they give the public when they are streaming. But it seems to be real because it persists even in the more private Twitter audio captures, or was it not Twitter audio? It was a third party group. But yeah, they've discussed their own lives rather heavily behind the relative safety of their anonymous avatars, of course. But they are definitely the best known dating couple in the VTuber scene, are in fact queer, and Nijisanji in general tends to have a lot of LGBT representation in general. Hololive as well, although with Hololive, it's actually more of a question of how much of what they're doing is actually actual like relationships rather than kayfabe. That's more of a question with them because they like the only times that they talk about it are over stream, and at least like to the extent of my knowledge, that is the case with them.
So there are like performances of relationships specifically for the purposes of. I mean, I guess because it is kind of now that you bring it up, wrestling actually seems like a good analogy for it.
Yeah,
because like
the perfect
that's
analogy.
also a scene where like where everyone kind of knows that they're putting on a persona, but people get really invested in the persona.
Yeah. Yeah, Hololife's Flair, yeah, as Shout Eris points out, uh, Flair and Noel from Hololive especially, we are like 99% sure that's an actual couple as well as another lesbian couple. Um, I'm pretty sure there are at least some male gay relationships amongst the Niji content creators as well. Akina, one of their newer talents, has talked about his bisexuality a lot. Estelle from Holostars has extensively talked about his his 8 to 2 hit rate of girls to guys in his dating life. So at very least, we definitely know that the VTuber agencies have no qualms about featuring LGBT content creators, and definitely don't keep them from talking about it. So that's definitely more of a, like props to them compared to a lot of even like Western agencies that you would think would be a lot more open minded about discussing things like that.
Yeah, but again, that Western Puritanism that we all like to pretend that we don't have comes through.
Yeah, yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. Definitely, there are differences in how Asian conservatism treats LGBT versus how Westerners do it. It's more of a filial obligation issue rather than a religious one, but it's still there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and definitely, as Mud has stated, Hololive is more about selling the appeal of Yuri and Yaoi from the POV of the Japanese, and there's definitely a lot to be said, to be criticized about the lens in which Yaoi and Yuri material is presented, because that is more to sate the appetite of heterosexuals interested in the opposite gender than necessarily is to reflect like the lived reality of being gay or being bi or being a lesbian or being transgendered as an Asian person, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's been a long-standing conversation in like Western anime communities, especially, is that like when you like the thing about like there's tons of gay porn in the anime community, but there's very little porn specifically made for gay people. By
yeah.
contrast, you can find lots of lesbian porn, but not a lot of porn made for lesbians,
Although I would say this is also another point in
relatively
favor
speaking.
of. Yeah, sorry, what was that?
No, nothing. Go on.
All right. What I was going to say is that this is also another point in favor for VTubers, I think. Although I can't fully confirm it because obviously their actual like real life circumstances are not or should not be known to us really, but they're more able to talk about these things from the perspective of somebody of that background, of somebody of that characteristic, than you would get from standard boys love or girls love media, right? Like a lot of that's written by like heterosexual women on the boys love side, but talking about like, but having like a VTuber talk about their attraction to a colleague has a very 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 different like lens to it than you would get from
Yeah.
like somebody focusing how attractive the guys are.
Yeah,
Madam
and
Andrew.
it's a strange thing with the authenticity thing, is because like, I, again, being the dirty materialist that I am, like my approach to all kinds of like, whether it's you're watching me or whether I'm watching anything else, like a vlogger who's pouring their heart out. When you're watching internet content, you always have to have that distance of like, you don't know that this is not a performance, or you
Yeah.
don't know the extent to which like this is a performance. You don't know the extent to which this person is holding something back. I am always holding something back, like from my audience, always. Like, and that's true of everywhere. And what you find with creators who try and be completely honest and open and say everything is they burn out really quickly
Yeah.
because that's not healthy.
You definitely lose something yourself in doing so. Uh,
A
we're both
lot.
millennials, so we're used to oversharing, but we also know a lot of the like psychic pain that comes with doing so on a regular basis. Uh, yeah. Uh, the like, what was the point I was trying to make? In terms of like LGBT like representation in VTubers, yeah, definitely there is some of it is definitely on the kayfabe level. As Chad has been going off now, the Takamori relationship from Hololive Myth, the English branch of Hololive, is very, very obviously played up as part of their characterization fiction, and that obviously the immortal that death can't get rid of is very much somebody that she can't get rid of in a very metaphorical sense as well as a physical one. Not only can the immortal phoenix not die, but the immortal phoenix keeps on harassing her, and that's playing up to the character as designed. But we can see that in their personal relationships, it's not necessarily a matter of attraction as a matter of friendship, really. But it's definitely not something we necessarily see or can be as justified in a lot of the relationships we see with, say, Sukoyo and Tomoe, who aren't even part of the same like debut generation, and whose characterizations are basically just human beings, except also attractive anime women.
Yeah, and that must rub up with some tension against the whole like the appeal of authenticity.
Yeah. Chat's been going off about this as well, but there's definitely some pushback against having that sort of like fake attraction or fake relationship, right?
Yeah.
Kayfabe being what it is, I'm kind of a two minds about it myself. Well, not two minds. I'm relatively neutral on its presentation, as part of the appeal of VTubers is being able to occupy a personality and characteristic that doesn't necessarily match your real life circumstances in the first place. So I'm not necessarily against that kind of like long term fictionalization, but it's also something that I feel you definitely have to take care not to have them cross over too much, cross the streams too much.
Yeah, it's the thing is like when you mix that kayfabe with authenticity, because that's again when you get into like there is like a fetishization aspect to, especially with queer relationships, but with straight relationships as well, when they are performed for an audience. There is that element of what's it called, vicarious living, where the experience you're selling to the audience is like getting to experience secondhand some of the feelings of that relationship through the thing, which is like that's normal for live streaming and performing. But when you mix that into the problem of like authentic representation and things like that gets hairy. I don't think I have a hot take on it, but like that's a hairy thing.
Yeah, rather than like being like a general like class of like ethical issues, I think it's just more like a general class of potential risks, right? It's like it's possible to do this well, but you are basically traipsing through a field of possible landmines, and for benefits that are plausibly more aesthetic than actual.
Yeah, it's a naughty thing. Like I'm trying to be careful not to be dogmatic about it because it's a really fucking hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's not a simple like because sometimes you get people who are saying like, well, shipping real people is always wrong, and there's like anyone who is not gay or queer who performs any kind of creates any kind of content around queerness, that's appropriation and therefore it's wrong, and that's like. But the trouble is, not every person who's queer knows it yet. Sometimes people need to be allowed to explore a safe space. And there's no reason why straight people shouldn't be allowed to tell queer stories. It's just that the problem isn't that straight people are telling queer stories. The problem is that, again, capital prefers to reward straight people for telling queer stories and saying, oh my God, you're so brave to tell this controversial story, while throwing gay people in jail for having sex in a place that someone decided that they were not like allowed to. Like, it's structural. It's the structural thing that shouldn't be crushed down to the individual level. So like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with two people performing a gay relationship when they're doing a storyline. Like they're putting on a play essentially. They're doing it as entertainment, but there is that thing of like maybe it's not the best thing in the world if a corporation is benefiting from it while not necessarily giving the same representation to authentic relationships. But what it sounds like is that there are authentic relationships there. Like there is authentic representation.
Or at the very least,
at which point it's like it's probably okay.
Yeah, maybe it's definitely given like the blurry nature between their like real life selves and the character they play on stream. It's a very fraught topic for VTubers especially, and because how relatively new this sort of like half kayfabe, half real situation is with them. it's relatively unexplored territory as well. So a lot of the ethical like boundaries are still like being defined by the creators as they play along. Um, but I, especially for gay lensing, at least part of the problem I see with it for straight creators is that they tend to write it from straight lenses in the first place, and that's not necessarily something
Yeah.
that we can claim is coming out from like Sukoyo or Tomoyo, right? Like whatever character they're playing, or Noel and Flair, when they're like speaking about their like intimate like moments of intimacy, it's coming from a lens of their own like personal viewpoints, and it's not something that their managers are telling them to do. Although their managers did pay for them to go to a hot springs at one time because it's good content. And you know what? Given a deal like that, I'd probably take it too. Like they might not
Yeah,
be
I mean,
totally be flirting with each
again, like,
other,
I don't
but
think I could fault any individual person, but like you can. There is a structural criticism, and like it's mostly I'm sort of waffling around in it because like sometimes I see people who are very well-meaning, and who are like trying to sort of like stamp out the problematic thing, who get into this thing where like because that's how neoliberalism works on the brain. Like they take these structural criticisms and they sort of laser focus them down on problematic individuals, as though like if we just purge the problematic individual, we will solve the structural issue, and that's just not. It's just not how it works. So
well,
like there's definitely like the thing I want to get across. Is I'm being very careful because I know I have an audience. It may be problematic to have people who are not queer perform a queer relationship on stream, but it is not at all useful like to go after them for doing that. It might be useful to go after the structure that rewards it, i.e., demand authentic representation. Like demand that, hey, if you're gonna have this shit, like this performance stuff, you better pay some actual real life queer people to like you better give them a stage as well. Better give them the same space, the same opportunity to express themselves.
yeah, very
Like, because
much.
that's the thing. It's not that it's wrong for straight people to engage in gay storytelling. It's wrong if straight people engaging in storytelling about gay things displaces queer people expressing their own experience. Like,
Yeah,
that's the problem. It's not. Yeah, it's this thing of like the hive mind tends to conclude from the general to the specific very, very quickly.
I would go so far as saying as you can in fact target specific people to solve the problem, but you're not supposed to be targeting the creators because they're not the cause of the problem. They're not the ones writing the policy.
No.
Target the policymakers, however, which they want because they are in fact the policymakers. And you know what? You may actually make some headway. Uh, if there
Yeah.
was in fact like
Organize a little bit. Join a union.
yes, push
Stage a
back.
protest. Punch a Nazi.
Yes, yes. And if you need to if you need some 3D printed uh, plastic knuckles to help with that endeavor, I'm not saying I know somebody or I know how to get a 3D printer, but um, anyhow, where were we? Right, the whole representation and design issue. Um, to make a segue out of that, a lot of the designs for Ninja Sanji are basically just like basically real life people except animatified, and a lot of that is one like what I would consider like one of the three major schools of design for VTubers in general, and that they're like in a lot of cases just all they really want to be is an idealized version of themselves or an idealized version of like the sort of person they want to be as a content creator, as a public performer, and so you end up significantly with a lot of characters that are basically just pretty boys and girls. Like
Yeah.
with Nijizaji, they were the first ones to really figure out how to make a really popular male character, and that's basically ask the girls what they would like to see. And therefore, we have
Yeah.
Kuzuha, by far the most popular male creator in the VTuber space. With like, let me double check how many does he have at this point?
I see some vampire inspiration. A lot of he's a vampire. He's a vampire character
He is
design.
very much a vampire
Red eyes,
character.
white hair. I see a fang. I see sharp nails. Yep.
Yep, and he currently has 882,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. He's also currently playing Pokemon
Way
United.
done.
Yeah,
Well done.
very well done. There is a popular perception amongst the Western VTuber community that, sorry about that, that male content creators can't really make it big. And I would simply say that not only is the indie scene generally hard to really get an audience in general, but a lot of them are failing to realize what makes for like a popular male character design and a popular male character in terms of personality. And Kuzuha, despite how he looks, like you looking at this, especially his character model, you're expecting like an arrogant vampire type, right? Like you're thinking,
Yeah,
like,
I would expect like the sort of smug, self-confident type, at least from the pose and the way he's
and
portrayed
you'd be
there.
wrong. No, he's a huge introvert. He's a huge introvert that is endearingly clumsy in his social interactions, has to rely on what he calls a weather deck, like a preset list of conversation topics to break the ice. But he tries.
Oh,
He
so there's a
tries.
gap moe right there. Yeah, I
Yep.
see.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he has surpassed Beetle, but definitely at the yeah. Gokbei is asking if Kuzuha has surpassed Tsukino Mito yet, who used to be like the queen of Ninja Sanji. I think she still is too, still is pretty much. But in terms of personality types, where you're not getting out of him, it's like the arrogant sort of gamer boy that you get from like Tyler One or anybody else on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
You're just getting somebody that's really shy, has a hard time figuring out what to say, and happens to game pretty well. And if you're sticking him with his co-partner Kanae, also another really like a really standard Bishonen model, then what you're getting is in fact like a total dork. And apparently, being a really attractive dork is in fact what people want. Adham Kazen wants to show Kanae, so I'm going to bring that up real quick. Vtuber.
Yeah. Oh, someone asks, what is gap moe? It's a sort of nebulous concept, but basically, say you have a giant, muscular, really strong, tough-looking himbo with a scar across his face and a beard, and then when he talks, he talks like this, and it's I don't mean to intrude. Like if it's the gap between the presentation that you expect and the actual personality that's there. It can also go the other way. Gap moe can also be tiny little anime girl who, at the slightest provocation, will pull a hammer out of her dress and clock someone right in the balls. You know.
Or just tear you apart. And honestly, that's one of my favorite. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite types. Let me see. Did I bring out the right file? No, I did not. What happened to it? There we go. That is Kanai, his partner in the it's really hard to pronounce. It's a cross between the word Chronos and the word Nord, as in black. So because that's French, I can't pronounce it properly at all.
Chronoir, I would imagine, something like that.
Something like that. I don't ask me to pronounce it. It's going to get completely tangled up in my tongue. But yeah, Kanai, extremely pretty boy to the point where like his feminized avatar isn't much different from how he normally looks in the first place. Really soft spoken. Often duels with Kuzuha, especially for Apex Legends tournaments. And also happens to have really explosive temperament at times, especially when he's playing shooter games. But yeah, pretty boys sell, especially pretty boys with unexpected character quirks that belie how they physically look.
Yeah, and
Although,
anyone who's touched like a YA novel in the last 10 years
yeah,
would be able to tell you as much, frankly. Like
yeah,
it's sometimes it does amaze me how hard like it's like, and that comes also like you look at the incel community and what they think an alpha looks like, and then you look at what women actually get horny for, and it's like, my fucking god, dude, like you don't live in the same aesthetic universe as these people at all. Like, fucking hell. It's
yeah,
because it's not that like there's the like you can say a lot about the Star Wars prequels, right? Like you can say a lot of bad things about them, but one thing that George Lucas got 110 million% correct is that Anakin Skywalker was gonna be the archetype for the thing that's attractive to women for the next 20 years, like the dark, haunted, sort of emotionally vulnerable, but also very pretty young man who needs someone to take care of him, someone to fix him. Like that is popular, and it's popular for a reason. Like And the thing that fucking when like I hear that, like I've heard horror stories from like Inside Riot among other things, with like male executives sort of trying to, yeah, we want to make a character who appeals to female players, so I guess we just give them big muscles and no shirt or whatever, which is like, oh, you poor
It's
sweet
like
summer children, you have no idea.
it's like they're sort of on the right track with Trundle, but that's not quite. Well, the
Yeah.
Trundle redesign speaks for itself.
Yeah, the
Trundle did not need to be
traditional
ripped.
Trundle got a lot of people horny, and I know for a fact that a lot of men inside Riot just did not. They what? Why? He's not. He's badass. He's not sexy. He's badass.
And maybe
Yeah, that was funny.
maybe this is just speaking for myself, but I understood immediately that this is going to cause a lot of women to get really horny for a troll.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like once you know what to look for, you can tell. Like you can tell.
Oh yeah, and Pepperoni Secrets brings up the tone deaf threat skin. Yeah, like they
Yeah, I
understood
mean
that.
that's a misfire and a half.
Yeah, it like now we're getting a lot of League of Legends characters that basically just muscular dudes with their shirts off, starting with Set and going on from there, and it sort of gets the point and also sort of misses it. Like no, girls aren't exactly like, or at least people that are attracted to men aren't like are will be attracted to different characteristics, and the most dominant one, especially among cis heterosexual women, tend to be lean and dexterous. But you guys are playing to a stereotype rather than like bring them in as actual consultants. Although I'm sure the women on Riot's creative staff would disagree in that some of their tastes are being represented, but the monotonous representation is probably the biggest issue.
Yeah, and that also comes down to just like Riot's corporate culture, which has become so risk averse that it's deeply frustrating. But yeah, it is a thing of like broadly speaking, in culture, there's a lot of men who are very, very confident that they know exactly what women find attractive, and they will usually be the same men who will complain out loud and say something, well, women only want assholes. They only date the shitty assholes. They never date the nice guy. Like, there's an overlap between people who are very confident that they know what women want and people who absolutely do not have any fucking clue what women want.
Yeah, yeah, and it turns out a lot of women want Kanai. And a lot of dudes too.
And I can see why.
And a lot of dudes too. But yeah, I specifically
Yeah.
mentioned these two and Mirai as examples of basically people that are themselves except made attractive VTubers. Like these are basically just regular anime characters, except that they're now interacting on the screen, and that allows you to feel a lot prettier. Although, from what I understand, a lot of the most popular VTubers also like were potential real life models, which just raises questions about Ninja Sanji's recruitment policies, especially early on. But you know what? If it works for them, it works for them. But simply having an attractive model is enough for people to really go off, like me, like Gundo does. Just having a mask of somebody that you feel attractive as is a legitimate like school of design and a very legitimately successful one. But it's by far not the only one. Like we see a lot of fancy designs. We've seen like there's elves earlier. I showed on screen. Although I didn't talk about, but Random and Orc on the Western VTuber side. That's basically just a Warcraft 3 orc that's VTuber.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that guy. Is like that's a Western streamer?
Yes. Let me bring that up real quick. Yeah, this dude, big old burly and cheerful orc dude with fangs, and as an office worker. Yeah, this is a Random, a relatively small content creator on the Western side, and representation of basically the more fantastical elements of design on the Western side. Right, we're talking about like orcs. We're talking about non-human designs. Earlier, I mentioned Debbie Roo from the Niji Sanji scene, which is basically a demonic koala, a furry little cute thing.
Yeah.
And various things, including like non-human, non-living creatures. Like there's a legitimately a bread VTuber that I can't recall the actual screen name for, but it's basically just a bread with expressions, and yeah, the more conceptual side of things is totally legitimate, um, and is the fact that a demonstration of what you can get away with Live 2D. Like you don't need to be human. You don't even need to be anime. You can completely be the orc grunt from Warcraft 3, working a modern day job if you want to be, and that's also part of the appeal. In that there is no limitations to what you can get with an audience, except of course, the expectation that the further you are from the lowest common denominator, the probably the harder you'll have to find the people that you're looking for.
Yeah, because that's the thing is like among the VTubers we looked at so far, like the ones that have non-human characteristics, it's usually just like horns or wings or like it's usually accessories rather than actual specific physical changes. Like I haven't seen any furries yet, for example.
Oh, there are plenty of those. Other than of course the standard like cat girls, right? Although there are a lot of
Yeah,
those.
Kemono
Corona, for
Mimi.
example, is
Yeah.
a dog. Her friend, question marks, possibly girlfriend, Oka- Okayu is very much just a really really standard cat girl. Uh, there's legitimately a gorilla VTuber as well, and I'm not talking about Kanata. And of course, going back to the previous slide, we have koalas, demonic koalas with bat wings, and and Debbie-sama is definitely on the more blatantly furry side of things. There's
Yeah.
also straight up a Shiba Inu VTuber.
There fucking should be. Good.
Yep,
Good. I'm glad that that exists.
yep. Um, Debiru is definitely pushing on the outer limits of the envelope of like the fantasy type. It's almost like a parody at this point because they're simply like straight up non-human. But definitely like you can be a cute fuzzball if you want to as a VTuber, and that's legitimately a school of design amongst like the fancy tropes amongst VTubers to be non-human, to be like something that uh divorced from anthropomorphic representation. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, what's the most out there that you know of? Like the one that's most just blatantly like you said bread with one of them. Other like what else is there in terms of that space and how popular are they? Like relative to the ones that are hot anime girls and hot anime boys, how
def-
popular are the non-human ones?
definitely I would say they're more niche. The Lovecraftian ones definitely are very niche. They play to a very specific taste in market. Um, Chad has mentioned Juniper, a couple hamburger guys. Uh, the most out there one though, I think is somebody that we both know, Shindigs from Twitch,
Oh yeah.
whose whose experimentations.
Shindex who actually helped me fun fact helped me rig the avatar that I'm using right now.
Yeah, I kind of actually recognize his style. A lot of it is to be more exaggerated and bouncy, right? But we've both followed his Twitch channel. We've both seen what he's been up to. Um, his role
His
playing,
VTuber who was a gun.
yes, the gun VTuber, the burger seraphim model that I'm showing on stream is definitely on the hamburger angel, like biblical angel of hamburgers. It's definitely as far out there as can possibly consider. Although the most entertaining one I had from him was simply the cosplay of what was it, Evo? No, it's a TwitchCon. He was pretending that it was a TwitchCon from years and years back, and I think that drew the most people I've ever seen to one of his VTuber streams. Right, like he was legitimately just like having the audio files from a convention playing and acting out as if he was talking to people from convention, including raising his voice to try to get above the audience noise, and also talking. Yeah, this was like straight in the like at the tail end of the lockdown, so the pure nostalgia factor was almost painful because I think we're kind of all feeling it at the time. Like we just want those days back. Bastard made me feel things.
Yeah, yeah. Shindex, it's been fun to follow, like just how cursed he has made his various VTube avatars over time.
Yes,
I think he did a stream where he had a VTube avatar, but like every time he laughed, like if he laughed, his VTuber would get executed.
I'm sure he has. I think I missed that one, but that would not surprise me in the least because he has definitely been at the forefront of experimenting with what it means to be a VTuber, right? And how quickly you can turn around a rigging model if you keep it as basic and simple and the concept as simple as possible, and still as ridiculous and wild as that concept can be within the 24-hour scope he gave himself. Although I think he stopped with the 1 day turnarounds because in the end that's still way too much work to do on a constant basis.
Yeah, but like a collaborative team of 2 or 3 people could probably do that. Like,
Yeah. Now, yeah, as Mud has mentioned, these are very very niche concepts. It's definitely more of him experimenting than like trying to like draw in people. But like,
yeah, Shindek's thing is like the concept is that there is a new cursed VTuber every once in a while. Come see the crazy weird thing,
yeah,
and not so much get attached to any of them.
yeah, and that's specifically because he wants to experiment with it rather than being like a full time VTuber himself. But like what's been proven time and again is that you don't necessarily need the prettiest model, you don't need the sexiest model. You just need to be able to have something that fills a niche, stands out amongst the crowd. That you're not just like a generic, like you want to avoid looking necessarily as generic as possible. But in the end, it still counts to how well you can play that role, right? Like earlier, I showed Pikami, and her avatar is like definitely more in the yeah, there we are. Definitely not what you consider like a standard sexy model, right? This is not like a standard anime girl. This is, if anything, her design probably hews closer to Western animation schools in terms of the exaggerated eyes, the round like the round face, the chinless face, really, and like this is not something that you would necessarily find out of place in Cartoon Network, and it's just also really really popular.
True.
Yeah, old school Disney
Yeah,
vibes.
that's the other thing is like I saw I've seen like some VTubers like when you talk about something like what was her name, Gura something, Shark Girl, like there are some characters like that are specifically designed on chibi aesthetics, like really really specifically very highly simplified, and in that sense kind of inhuman
Yeah,
character designs that are like not designed to, unlike the big titty anime girls that are not really designed to look like they're physically possible, like or even pretend like they're physically possible.
yeah. And chat's criticizing me for not using her updated model, and that's a fair criticism because if anything, her artist leaned even more heavily on the caricature style rather than what we consider like standard like anime stereotypes, right? And I will bring that up right away for all of you.
And in the meantime, someone in chat asked me if I have embraced being a VTuber myself, and like the answer to that is no. I'm not really a streamer by nature. My streams are more occasional, but the VTuber, it's nice to have it
Where is it?
because I don't want to do a face cam. But on the other hand, having a face cam, like just speaking from the business side of things, right? Having a face cam, like the human brain, I talk about this a lot in character design discussions. The human brain is programmed to look for faces. It is programmed to relate to faces, to care about faces. And so if you show a face on screen, this is why every Twitch streamer has a face cam. It's more engaging just like on a neurochemical brain level. So for me, having this little avatar that I can use for stuff like this when I don't want to be on camera, it's like it helps increase the engagement. Like on a very cynical level, it's just good for business to have.
Yep.
So for me, it's not so much that I'm embracing being a VTuber. It's more that like I want to have this benefit to my content, and it's nice to be able to like. Also for me, when I talk, it's nice to be able to emote a little bit. Like even if it's just shaking my head like this, even if it's just raising my eyebrows, it's nice to be able to sort of punctuate what I say by having a body language that's like visible.
Yep. To go on a tangent a bit, Oki asks, is it necessary to stream to be a VTuber though? And the answer is no. If anything, the live streaming VTuber is a relatively newer phenomenon, in that it only really started to kick off around like 2019. Prior to then, what you're mostly getting was pre-made YouTube content coming out of Kizuna Ai and everybody else, which is then in large part filming in a studio and then uploading the clip afterwards. Uh, the live streaming model didn't really kick off until the live 2D technology was both cheap and common enough for everyday users to acquire. And now it's common to live stream because it takes the least amount of like pre-planned effort to get a live stream out and get the model out and interact with your audience. The most popular, like by far one of the most popular content formats for live streamers, especially for VTuber live streamers, is simply the Let's Talk function format, where they're just talking to the audience, having discussions, sharing stories. But before then, it's definitely a lot of pre-done songs, dances, skits, especially comedic skits, and other general nonsense that comes pre-baked for you rather than made up on the spot. That's not to say that live streaming isn't easier, though. As I'm sure we're both aware. Like live streaming, especially on as constant a basis as these people do it,
it's exhausting.
Yeah, like staying on for hours at a time. Korone like stays in character with all her like inflections and personality tropes for 30 plus hours. Holy shit! I don't think I could do that. Like,
yeah, I've done 10-hour streams. Like when Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, I was just like, oh, I want to play this fucking game, and like, yeah, I was down for a couple of days. Like it knocked me out pretty heavily once I was done with all that. And that's the thing, is like, you wouldn't think so when all you're doing is you're sitting on your ass and talking into a microphone, but the mental strain of performing, and like I'm not performing even remotely on the level that VTubers are. Like I don't put on a persona anywhere near as intense. I'm not doing the same kind of character entertainment that they are. So like again, Corona doing 30-hour streams is like terrifying to me.
Yeah,
terrifying to me.
Just the thought of it alone is exhausting. Like more than exhausting. Like I've been up for a 70. No, it wasn't 72. That was another like cumulative total. But I've been up for 36-hour stretches before because of various like clients I've had to work with. I was not only sick for like a couple of weeks afterwards, but I was barely functional after the first 20 hours. And like already I was like in a really dire circumstances within like 15 hours. So
yeah,
the fact that she can apparently do this, go to her doctor. Her doctor says that, and half her doctor say that she's in relatively good health, is not only really remarkable, but also makes sense when I later learned that she's also a amateur boxer and stays incredibly fit.
That probably helps a lot, honestly.
That's a scary ass dog. Like, she might be a cute streamer to the rest of you, but the more you look into Corone's circumstances, an amateur boxer that can stand up
I'm
for
not going to
36
step to
hours.
Corone.
Yeah, I am not underestimating that dog.
I am not fucking with Corone. Absolutely not.
Nothing but respect for that dog.
Someone mentioned they replaced, in chat, I didn't know this, they replaced Kisuna Ai's actress?
They did not. That's a rumor. I know. I've done significant research about that circumstances. What happened was that she would have gotten replaced under the original company that she was working with. The circumstances there was that they were trying to diversify their content and content streams, right, and revenue streams resultantly. And what they did was bring in 3 other content creators, also women content creators, also women like skit makers and stuff like that, and dancers and gamers specializing in those specific fields, and all had them use the Kizuna Ai avatar as well, introducing them as like basically clone programs to the original Kizuna Ai. That was explosively unpopular, caused a lot of drama.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. To this day, as we're seeing in stream, people are still confusing whether or not the original Kizuna Ai is still involved. And there were rumors that the studio was considering getting her replaced. But what ultimately happened was that because of how unpopular that proved, the clones were spun off to be their own independent characters, one of which retired soon after. The 2 others are streaming as a gamer now and as a pink haired girl. I forgot Love Chan. And the original Kizuna Ai is still the only actress behind that character and has since bought out the assets for her and spun her off as her own independent company.
Good for her. Good job. That must have been fucking tough to negotiate. But that's an interesting question. Have there been cases of besides Kizuna Ai being a high profile, have there been cases of like attempting to replace the actor or actress behind a character, or are the characters just too inherently tied to their original performers?
So there are a couple of minor agencies that I know of when I did the research behind Kids in the Eye that did try to replace the actresses behind their models. And as far as I've been able to tell, every single one of those attempts have failed. Like the deeply personal nature of VTubing, the fact that it's your own personality driving and your own voice driving the character makes it difficult to replace on a one-to-one basis. Even if the characters happen to be using like voice filters to disguise the voice a little bit, especially if they're like a really popular voice actress or something like that. What has
Encouraging,
generally worked?
actually.
Sorry, what was that?
That's encouraging to me.
Yeah, and like just I agree that definitely the labor they put in to make the character recognizable amongst like a field of rivals in a field of like thousands of peers at this point. Like that's definitely like not only labor that should be recognized and rewarded, but also just fundamentally the sort of work they put in as a performer makes it really difficult to duplicate in the first place. Like I'm not sure if even like the most advanced voice modulation software can give you a replacement Kiryu Coco because I'm not sure you can find another woman that acts the way she does, talks and sings the way she does, and is willing to push boundaries the way she does as frequently as she does. Like at that point, you might as well first find an apprentice and then give them their own model and then say that this is Kiryu Coco the second, right? And make no like nobody should be under the illusion that this is the same person because it's impossible to wholesale copy certain characteristics and copy certain interactions, and especially when they're doing collabs when they're bouncing off of each other on like a completely impromptu basis. It's even harder to find to hide and disguise the reaction of your colleagues with you as well.
Yeah, but like the succession play, I could see working. Has that been actually done? Like someone actually been groomed to be like the successor of a specific VTuber?
Not so far. I'm sure they were trying with the Kids in the Eye, especially
Yeah.
since in general corporations don't like irreplaceable and indispensable parts unless you happen to be the CEO. Obviously, even
Yeah.
then, like at the highest level, the board of executives wants the CEO to be replaceable to some level, but on an acting basis, on a performative basis, that is much harder to do, and it's not something that has thus far been successfully done, and it's not something that the community seems to want done because the backlash against trying to replace a content creator for any other reason than that they personally want to be doing something else than VTubing has thus far been extremely severe. For good reason.
It's encouraging to me. Like it's
Yes.
always nice to see when some power remains in the hands of the worker. To circle back to my to my open leftism there for a second, but like that is encouraging to me that there is that level of the person retains own, because that's the worry I have also, and this is where we can circle back to League of Legends for a second. Seraphine, who Riot Games published as a champion about a year ago now, I think,
Yeah.
where they had this promotional campaign where they created a Twitter account for her, basically, that was being piloted by a marketing writer at Riot, who basically treated it as an opportunity to do some performance art, like try to tell sort of a character story about the difficulties of breaking out as a pop star, and like really. And the problem that the ethical problem that ran into is that it created instantly this very strong parasocial environment with the people who followed that account. And I kept a close eyes on it, and like a lot of people for whom like bought really hard into this, and all of that was ultimately in service of selling a League of Legends champion and like a skin line and a bunch of stuff that way. And the thing that I worry about a lot when it comes to virtual influencers, and let me tell the audience, by the way, a story if you haven't heard this one before. Virtual influencers are a thing. Arguably, you could say that VTubers on some level like have a little bit of overlap with them, but certainly something like Hatsune Miku would qualify as a virtual influencer, which is an entirely fictional character piloted entirely by a marketing company. And there is one particular marketing company that pilots two. One that's called Lil Michaela, And then another one, I forget the specific name, but Lil Miquela is in favor of Black Lives Matter. She's very progressive. She's very feminist. She stands for gay rights and queer rights. And then there's this other virtual influencer piloted by the same company, but marketed to a very different audience, who was a Trump supporter for a good long while. And like had public air quotes feuds with Lil Miquela about her support for President Trump and his policies and build the wall and all that bullshit. Until Trump was out of office and he wasn't really popular anymore, at which point the agency just pivoted, took their little virtual like avatar, pivoted her and said, "Oh, no, she's a Democrat now. Okay, she's sort of vaguely centrist, center right, a little bit leftist maybe, kind of thing." They just pivoted her like that.
Yep.
And said, "Oh, no, she doesn't believe in that shit anymore." And that shit fucking terrifies me, because once that happens, once companies can just like invent these fake people and have them shill for products and like and shill for political ideologies, like whatever the fuck is just profitable, right? Whatever's popular right now, whatever's profitable right now, without giving a shit about any of the principles. Like Lil Miquela, the virtual influencer, does not give a shit about Black Lives Matter. She's not a leftist. She's not progressive. She's not anything, because she's a fake person piloted by a soulless corporation. And I kind of, for a while, I have had the same worry about VTubers, is that there is this, like, especially with agencies having control over them, that, like, that because there is this anonymity, this separation between, like, the avatar and the real person, that the agency would be able to pull the same kind of shit. Like, basically, oh, well, we would like this thing to be pivoted in this direction, so fuck you, person who made the avatar popular. We're going to hire someone else to pilot the damn thing. Yep. And so I am encouraged to hear that that has thus far not been successful.
Yeah. Part of it, I think, is just simply, like, an emergent property of the budgetary matter of VTubing, and that VTubing only exists because certain technologies got significantly cheaper over time, right? Whereas Lil Miquela by product was very much a maximum effort, maximum budget approach, where they used like advanced AI design and heuristics to make the model, to make the design, to make them as human as possible, and to give them the voice and the marketing strategy behind it, right? That's a multi-million-dollar deal for a single influencer, but an influencer that's fully under company control. And I think that's the difference. As long as it's cheap enough, the human element is inevitable and also intransigent. You can't get rid of it. Your attempt to get rid of it triggers massive amounts of backlash from both the creator, who is now completely open to talk about their experiences as your influencer, and the audience, whose loyalty is not to your product, but to the personality that drove them to your product in the first place. Whereas Lil Miquela will never speak up against product, because she fundamentally cannot be programmed to in the first place.
Yeah, she's not a person. Like, she's exclusively just images created by a computer. And like, and I'm glad to hear that VTubing seems to be immune to that for the moment, anyway.
One of the only
at
reasons
least until GPT-3 begins to have voice synthesis.
Yep, like a lot of these agencies, especially Hololive, have gone through various amounts of drama and like, frankly, traumatic amounts of like audience controversies throughout its history. Right, we've had one case where Mel was stalked by somebody within the agency itself, and the police was involved, and the fact that she's still with the company is like eyebrow raising, right? We've had the whole Taiwanese issue where a lot of people felt like the company didn't do enough to protect people from nationalists and from stalkers and everything else like that. I will argue that it's almost impossible to really have enough to protect you from international backlash of that scale, but definitely being seen trying, and how much you can tell people you're trying, is definitely something that's definitely going to cause a lot of various arguments, a lot of various ill will and like bad faith arguments about the general principles behind it. But one of the only reasons why they managed to weather out so much and still retain so much of their fan base and still be growing so rapidly year over year is that their own creators have come out and said that internally, like especially Fubuki, have come out to say that if there was ever anything in the company that she would severely disagree with, she would personally leave and tell everybody else to leave as well. And the fact that she's still with the company throughout all that, with that actual threat to the company itself that they have to toe the line with their own creators, has not only like engendered loyalty to Fubuki herself, but also gave Hololive perhaps it's third and fourth chances along the way as well. So the creator loyalty to the company is probably the most valuable currency they have.
Yeah, and if a creator publicly said this company's treating me like shit, they would like that could make them crash and burn, basically.
Yep, just like outright leave. Steel Profit also know that
Good.
there was an incident in Coco Chat when Anti was made by an admin, or was made an admin or a moderator for a chat. I remember this incident. I hate to say it, but it's her own fault because she was clicking through like the YouTube UI too quickly and accidentally made somebody moderator that she shouldn't have, and that kind of spilled over from there. That's more on YouTube's end though. YouTube's UI can sometimes be a little questionable.
YouTube's UI is garbage, especially when it comes to stream moderation. It is garbage relative to Twitch.
Yeah. As also Mud brings out the really legitimate point that the honesty of the threat, the legitimacy of Fubuki's threat to leave Hololive if she finds anything in it that she severely disagrees with, is something that we have to take her word for, right? But also, she's also popular enough that if she went indie and publicly went indie, the company would have very little they can do about it. Like she isn't.
Yeah.
She's already broke the million mark, so that's safe on her end. Like I don't think her quality of life would necessarily diminish too much if she were to go indie at this point. But everything we've heard from Hololive, even recently, is that internally the company culture is friendly enough on the social, like casual basis, that there are more benefits for them psychologically to be staying with the agency than it is for them to leave it. Which is good. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear that masks off metaphorically, they actually are getting along so much behind the scenes that they don't actually want to leave.
Yeah. Power to the creator, I say self-servingly.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also that's a legitimate point. We can only take her word for it. We don't know what kind of pressures they're applying on the inside to like let that sort of statement go through. But like I pay attention to the rumor mills. I haven't heard anything too bad about Hololive internally. I have heard the occasional spat between creators because in the end we're talking about human beings interacting on a near daily basis. There's bound to be some level of friction sometimes, but nothing beyond the pale. Nothing to raise alarms. Mostly just people being brats. And brats make for good stories.
Yeah. So moving, one thing I wanted to get to before we have to end the stream is like Western agencies. Are there any like fully Western agency? Like, are there any fully Western like businesses involved in this, or is it like Hololive English and Nijisanji English? Like, or is it like colonization from Eastern companies coming into the scene?
The term colonization takes on a very interesting term when it's people colonizing the American sphere.
I mean, it's not really. Yeah, I know.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, I didn't want to call it a Japanese invasion.
Yeah. I would say that the scene in the West is still fairly nascent. It's comparable to where the Japanese scene was in about 2018, if on a much bigger and much more active scale. There currently is only VShoujo for Project Melody, for Nanners, for Iron Mouse, for Zentreya, for the girls under that aegis, and they're structured very differently from Hololive from Nijisanji, and that's not only did they all exist as content creators long before VShoujo came along, but entry into VShoujo is very much dependent on the content creators who are currently in it. Vebe, for instance, is a really new, it's relatively new addition to VShoujo as an agency, but has been part of their social circle the entire time. I can't help but wonder if maybe the only reason why she wasn't part of the launch group was simply some kind of like contractual obligation she still had to wait out at the time or something like that. There are, like, as Gokbei has mentioned, Thai agencies, Indonesian agencies, but we're specifically talking about Western agencies. And right now, that is the only one that I know of that is of, like, any level that any level of, like, distinction that we're able to talk about. There are smaller groups like Atelier Live and Sundaria, which actually is a corporation, but their overall influence in the overall scene is minimal compared to what we've seen from V Shoujo and from Hololive and from Nijisanji.
So the Western scene is much more dominated by independents, basically.
Yes. Not to say that Japan doesn't have like a really really strong independent scene itself, and like I said, Live 2D based the development of Live 2D tracking technology in particular basically lowered the barrier to entry enough that anybody that can afford like $1,000 can get into the scene, and that's a one-time fee. It's not as if you're paying $1,000 every year or something like that. Still expensive, still a barrier, but a lot of people can eventually save up for that kind of cash if they really, really want to be a VTuber and really want to be part of the scene. And honestly, streaming and content creation is hard enough that if that I wouldn't encourage people to do it on a casual basis anyhow, because you're probably going to get a lot of heartaches if you discovered that after like 6 months of work you've barely gotten any attention whatsoever, and the hours that you have to spend into like making your content as good as possible is in fact a full-time job. So having some barrier to entry just to discourse to people that will otherwise be harmed by that sort of like intensive focus probably isn't necessarily the worst thing to have. But in terms of Western agencies, to loop back on that topic, I know of rumors of certain organizations wanting to bring VTubers into their acres. Basically, C9 has Vienna, for instance, which is basically a dragon VTuber. Plays League of Legends.
Yeah, because I was gonna bring that up. That's sort of our other little shared space, which is esports, which is where a lot of Western streamers have their home. And I was wondering if like esports companies were looking at this as a potential avenue for expansion.
So what I can say from the rumor mill is that C9 is not the only one looking at it, nor the only one planning to release one. But they're the first one to activate upon it, and I think they've done it pretty successfully. I like watching the Vienna's content. But a lot of them are still relatively skeptical of the space, and I imagine they'll be less so as Hololive and Nijisanji basically does the trailblazing audience building for them. Because when you see that Hololive announces a new content creator, and she breaks the 500,000 mark in a week, you kind of have to pay attention.
Yeah, wasn't there that one? What they had a Twitter account launch, and they had like one tweet on it that was like a smiley or something, and it got so much engagement that Twitter basically shut the account down for suspicious activity.
Yeah. Oh, it wasn't smiley. Because she is a V singer, a musician, it was a repeat sign, a classic repeat sign in musical terms.
Ah, right.
And that alone was enough. Completely crashed her Twitter account. She was locked out for like 72 hours, which is the maximum like Twitter usually like keeps a suspicious account locked out. And the poor girl, Iris. Yeah. She's been fun to follow.
Yeah, that must be fucking overwhelming, man.
Now, obviously, when I say new content creator, that's with a lot of quotation marks. That's a very relative.
Oh, so she was hired as a creator that was pre-existing.
Yes, I'm pretty sure all of Hololive is to some extent or the other. Even if you're not actively looking for it, there are YouTube accounts that actively try to dox them and leak them to their previous materials. So it's kind of unavoidable. But the fact is, there isn't a single Hololive English creator in the current generation that wasn't well known for one kind of content or another in their prior efforts. So they're all proven content creators. There's nothing suspicious or there's nothing mysterious or magical about the Hololive content creator formula. It's basically find what works, give them a cute avatar, and let them do their thing. And so far, it's worked out really, really well.
Yeah, so the pattern so far hasn't been taking a chance on unknown talent, but rather find someone who actually knows how to entertain a crowd, and that makes sense, like from a business perspective, I suppose.
Now, this is actually something that's fairly unique to the English side of things, and that although most of the Japanese side are also like veteran content creators, they're not necessarily like the biggest well-known ones. They're simply people that used to have like a Nico Nico Doga account back when like Nico Nico TV used to be the streaming platform for Japan. except that
Yeah.
Apple TV also like severely went obsolete because they don't do any updates whatsoever to the infrastructure. Um,
Is there a cultural is there a taboo in the like is it like with kayfabe, is there a taboo among fans about talking about the creator's work outside of the VTuber?
yeah, mostly just from the doxing standpoint, but also because I'm not completely sure how it developed in Japan, but the general sense is that the company wants you to focus on what they're doing in the here and now, rather than any of the potentially controversial like backgrounds they might have been involved with before. A lot of
Uh
them, yeah, it's either against contract or they're just like outright trying to start afresh. Like I know of at least a couple of like Halloween folks that might be using that approach as well.
yeah.
Um,
Because what I'm curious about, because like I've seen Western streamers like Lily Pichu, for example, that
yeah.
picked up a VTube avatar for a while, and plenty of Western streamers have kind of picked up VTube avatars for like when they don't want to appear on camera. Like they've at least for a while. I don't know if that's a thing that's stuck around very much. Um, and I was kind of curious, like how like if there was this pre-existing thing of like, oh no, the VTuber is separate from like the person's other activity, if that gets muddled when it's a content creator who like just kind of switches in and out of it.
So definitely, it's more controversial, I think, in the East than it would be in the West. Although a lot of big profile content creators that eventually picked up VTuber avatars in the West don't use them particularly frequently. I think the standpoint here is the difference between playing a character that also happens to be you versus playing
Yeah,
you, but you happen to have an avatar as well when you don't feel like being online or like being 100% online. And like Scar, for instance, when he uses his dragon avatar right out of Dragon Tales, it's still Scar. He's not pretending otherwise. He's not playing a character. It's just him. It's not as if he's going to be making dragon puns all day, although he should. He should. But
oh shit, that avatar is adorable. I just looked it up. Holy
yeah,
shit, that's adorable. That's
that's right out
fantastic.
of Dragon Tales. That's just this really really adorable dragon avatar, and also he doesn't utilize it enough. It's adorable. He should be using it more. But for a
Yeah.
lot of folks, like there's definitely more cultural expectation of kayfabe around Japanese VTubers than there are around Western content creators that are getting into VTubing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
like I don't make a big deal about keeping my own identity separate from my real life one, but I also don't make it a point of connecting the two either, right? I've only mentioned like one or two plausible connecting points, and of course the 3D printing thing is a huge hint, but unavoidable. I made this account in the first place because I just wanted to have something that could allows me to focus on pure passion projects without any other involvement with everything else I'm doing, and it's working out so far. But also, passion projects tend to overlap with what I'm doing in real life.
Yeah, it's the problem when your hobby becomes your work, right?
Oh god, yeah, that was a terrible
This
mistake.
used to be a passion project for me, kid, way back when.
Yeah,
Not
if I could
anymore.
tell, if I could tell like 20-something-year-old me not to delve too deeply into this thing and focus on something more profitable with his writing, I'm not sure I would, but it would definitely be a consideration. Uh, just saying. Uh, Anyone else younger than me, definitely reconsider how much you want to make your hobbies profitable because they stop being hobbies and therefore they stop being quite as enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, like if anyone out there is listening that's considering getting into VTubing or content creation of any kind, is like if you're game streamer, keep some games just for yourself that you don't share with anyone ever.
Yeah,
Don't post about them, don't make videos about them. Just play games that you like because you do it. If you're getting into like making content around like being critical of video games, have some things that you can enjoy that you just don't. You turn your brain off. You don't give a shit that this bad characters. I don't care. I'm just enjoying it. For the love of God, like don't monetize every part of your hobby because you will have nowhere to recover your humanity afterwards.
yeah,
I
it's
speak from
exhausting.
experience.
It's extremely exhausting. I try to make a point not to talk constantly on in character about the gacha games I'm playing, or else it just becomes impossible to enjoy anything I'm doing whatsoever. unavoidable
Yeah.
sometimes because like you want to make the sort of content that you can see yourself sustaining interest in talking about for tens of hours at a time, for weeks on end, for months on end, or even years on end for the really long term stuff, right? And that overlaps naturally with the stuff that you want to play. But you definitely want to keep a backup that's completely unattached, or else one, when you really want to play it, you become frustrated to wait for another like streaming session before you can re-engage with it. And two, when you're not engaged with it and you get sick of it, it becomes a chore, and the chore is one thing you don't want. You don't want this to be, at least too much of a chore. And like the difference between an obligation of work and obligation, like a self-imposed obligation, is massive, and psychologically massive and underappreciated, I think.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, that's something actually I talked to the viewer who was asking questions in my Discord the other day, who said that they were suffering from a lot of performance anxiety around their art, their drawings, because like they had so much fear that it wasn't gonna come out well enough. And like my advice there is like don't share it then, just
Yeah.
draw it, and maybe you're happy with it, maybe you're not happy with, but don't put it on Twitter. Don't put it out there for anyone to react to. Like you don't have to. Like that's a thing. Like which. Pivoting to something completely different, like Bo Burnham and like his special Inside, which blew up recently. Like one of the things that Bo Burnham has always talked about, and one of the things that's really important with content creation is you like no matter how much the Twitter algorithm wants you to, no matter how much the YouTube algorithm or TikTok, or no matter how much all these fucking websites that profit from your content want you to, you don't have to share everything ever. And that, to circle that back to VTubers, one of the advantages of a VTuber is that allows you to keep something of yourself back. People don't get access to you the same way that they do for a lot of like people who sit there on camera. Like, so you can at least hold back the aspect of, I don't have to put on makeup, I don't have to look nice clothes, I don't have to have showered today, I don't have to clean up my fucking room, because the avatar does the work, and I can hold like part of myself back, which again is also part of the reason why I use this freaking avatar right here. It's the act of retaining something that belongs just to you and that doesn't belong to an audience ever. Which I know I'm getting a little preachy here, but like in terms of, because I know that there are people who follow me who are interested in making content themselves, and this is the kind of shit I wish someone had told me before I got into it.
Yeah, absolutely, especially for VTubers. A lot of the younger ones in the West, especially, hit the burnout point really rapidly, just out of sheer over enthusiasm with what they're doing. And like, sorry, you're probably hearing my dog barking in the background, but the point is, the whole point of putting on a mask is to make things easier for yourself. So the one thing you don't want to do, regardless of your VTuber type or design, is to get rid of that advantage. Like,
if you have the VTuber avatar, use it to keep some part of yourself safe and private.
Yeah, like obviously I think about roughly 80 to 90% of the Western VTuber scene definitely has a Niji Sanji or Hololive recruitment on the back of their mind, right? Even if they're not like actively pursuing the goal, they're probably going to at least like make the token effort to file in the application form in the first place, because they want. It's hard not to be a little envious and jealous of what we're seeing out of the agencies right now, even beyond the fact that they will have like a legitimate, like pre-established social network of collaborators to make content with and have fun with on a friendly basis, because the infamously family-like atmosphere in Hololive is something that a lot of introverts will naturally be attracted to. But beyond that, the quality of their models, the quality of the content they have, the access that having like a legitimate agency gives you is obviously something that's desirable to somebody that's just starting out that only has like regularly like only 1 or 2 followers at most on their streams, right?
Yeah.
But I think very few of them have put any thought into what it means to be a high-profile content creator in terms of the obligation, stress, and effort they have to then put in. It's
the doxing and harassment, like that's the thing that scares me a little bit about this person getting 500,000 subscribers before they've even streamed. It's like, even if they come from a content creator background, having 500,000 people getting to know you for the first time, and all of them scrutinizing you, and all of them like comparing you to other things, and having so many eyeballs and so much attention on you from scumbag shit spaces like Kiwi Farms also. Fucking hell, that's scary. Like, I wouldn't... Like, I have 10,000 subscribers, something like that right now. That's already the stuff that gets a little... Like, I cannot... Like, I learned several years ago that I cannot name search myself on Google or on Twitter. I can't do it because it will kill me.
Yeah,
like, my brain will go insane, and I will fall apart as a human person. So I've had to mute mentions of myself. I can't go look at it because it'll kill me. And I have 100,000 subscribers. That's not that much in the grand scheme of YouTube. Imagine having 500,000 like that and having to learn to deal with that filtering immediately. Fucking hell.
Yeah. Which is honestly why I would say that COLLAB is lucky to have the creators they have, and to have the pool of applicants they have from the Ian side of things, because they can pick and choose at a leisure, choosing specifically not only just proven talent, but people that have already proven capable of bearing that kind of pressure in the first place. Like, there's that their managers, as much as they have to deal with the idiosyncrasies of the complete perverts in their group sometimes, at least they're dealing with mostly veteran perverts, the ones that are used to dealing with the sort of attention that they're getting to at least some extent. This has been less so for COLLAB when they were starting out in the first couple generations, when a lot of the talents they picked up were relatively untried. I think Okayu, for instance, her streaming experience was limited to like only 1 or 2 like Niji Sanji streams at most. She was picked up because she was a friend of another recruit, along with a lot of the other like early generation people. Their ultimate experience with like as content creators was learned along the way, which is a much harder task.
Yeah, I mean, it's boy, like I get stuck on that, like having 500,000 subscribers right out the gate. It's
I mean,
like that's the thing about agencies. Like, if they provide anything, I hope they provide like filtering and moderation, and like that they provide a barrier between the person and the tsunami of everything that's coming at them.
Yeah, I think possibly one of the best developments we've seen right now is something that I don't think anybody else has actually noticed, and that COLLAB Japan has not announced a new generation for over a year. And this was in the wake of them declaring that they were going to spend a lot more effort in developing their corporate support, their support staff, their managers, everybody else in the back office, rather than hiring on new talents for at least like a short moratorium. And that moratorium lasted effectively for a whole year now. Generation 5 was announced over a year ago to the date, I think, if off by 1 or 2 months at most. And that's the longest they've gone, the main branch has gone, without declaring another like audition or recruitment period. And as far as we can tell, this has mostly been to the benefit of the mental health and psychological welfare of their creators, and that they have the support, they have the managers, they have a lot of sponsors being actively recruited on their behalf, and that's where most of the money is being made for them, on an individual basis. And yeah, that's what an agency should be doing for you. As far as I'm concerned, possibly the biggest reason why we haven't seen any successful Western agency is that nobody else has caught on that you're not relying on the talent. The talent should be relying on you.
Yeah, that's an important thing. Oh, yeah.
And honestly, it's hard to get to that point as well, because COLLAB wasn't at that point for the longest time. A lot of the, like, every other month or so, you hear about, especially another Southeast Asian VTuber agency that gets shuttered down because of poor management, and that's because the management expects that cute anime girls talking on stream is enough to carry the company. Kind of to some extent.
That sounds just about capitalist.
Yeah. Like, to some extent, they are the public face of the company. They do a lot to carry it in general, in terms of like the audience perception and everything. But it has to be a two-way street, right? the management also has to do a lot of work. I think a lot of folks, when they stumble through the VTuber scene, think that it should be easy enough to get a couple of proven artistic talents to make the models and act as streamers on the scene, because like art streams tend to be relatively popular as long as you have like a decently skilled artist to be your main face, or like a decently skilled singer to be your main face, and then you reap the rewards. But the actual like reality of the work involved is significantly higher than expected and significantly more formalized. Like in the end, you're a talent agency. You have to act like it with all the regulations that's involved in that kind of lifestyle and activity. And yeah, as Vulture said, it took a lot of experimentation, a lot of time, and a lot of luck to be in the position they are now, and they infamously made a lot of mistakes. Nijisanji now is well respected, even like what we're hearing now from Nijisanji creators is that where they are now is pretty damn good. But I do know that, especially early on, that agency struggled a lot internally with supporting their talents sufficiently, giving them enough resources to work with, and generally like having like a proper managerial presence for them. Yep. Yeah. My voice is starting to go, to put it pragmatically. How are you feeling so far?
I've got a lot of experience talking for a long time, so I'm fine. But I think we've kind of run through certainly the things that I wanted to talk about and that I was interested in. And thank you for this stream. I learned a lot about something that's very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe I should make some videos about VTubers at some point, do some research.
I can only imagine that this scene's only going to grow and evolve even further. The Western scene especially. What's the best metaphor for this? It's as if a dam broke and we didn't even know that was a dam. It's like we knew that there was increasing popularity amongst VTubers, amongst like the Western weebs, which is already a pretty significant like demographic, right? Always millions a year going to conventions and everything. But nobody expected Gargura to beat like Kizuna Ai within months of her debut in terms of subscribers. We didn't expect records to be shattered on like a weekly basis by that group. And even if Nijisanji is not seeing the same amount of success, we're still talking about content creators breaking the 100,000 mark within the first month of their debut. They might be the Nijisanji English scene may be smaller than Hololive on an absolute basis, but also on a comparative basis to literally every other content creator out there, they are wildly successful, and that is just in general. So I can't help but think that we're only at the beginning of the Western scene as it is. That we are basically time shifted back to 2018, and it's basically another explosive era for the scene. So yeah, everything we say here may very well be outdated in a few months' time, but that's just how things are.
Well, we'll just have to do another stream then, won't we?
Yep.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun. If you are not familiar with me, then you can find me. There's a link to my channel, and I do video game content stuff about character designs a lot and lore writing, lots of League of Legends stuff, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, things like that. And if you're here from my audience, hey, give Lucian a follow. He's 3D printing streams. He plays Guilty Gear. He's about to challenge a bunch of other VTubers in Guilty Gear, right?
Yep. My plan is to basically train up for about a month. Make sure that I still remember how to play fighting games properly, because it's been a long time since I took one seriously. And then just do money match content creators all over the place, VTubers otherwise, but definitely with a focus on VTubers, because I want to get better, and I'm willing to pay to get my ass kicked. That's the best way to get better. But I also do. I just finished streaming all of AI Somnio Files by Chunsoft, which is a really off-putting mystery game with forms of humor and also forms of shocking material that I definitely didn't expect. But as a content warning, if you are particularly squeamish about eye injury in particular, don't watch those streams. I kind of regret watching those scenes myself. There was so much of it. There was so much of it, Skyen. Why must they abuse the poor eyeball like that? God.
And if you're into that stuff, hey, bunch of new content for you to watch.
Yeah. I will also be playing real-time, not real-time strategies, tactical RPGs, especially in the vein of XCOM. I'm pretty sure I will be streaming significant amounts of Genshin material now that Inazuma is out because I fucking love exploring that scene. It might be exploitative. It might. Let's face it. It's very much an exploitative gacha game. But holy shit, they put that money to good use. The aesthetics of that game is and the exploration of the Asian fantasy regions that they've developed for that game is frankly unmatched in anything I've seen so far. Like, sure, it might ultimately fundamentally be a Breath of the Wild clone, but Breath of the Wild in Asian fantasy is something I can get behind.
Yeah. And hey, if you want me to come back on another stream to discuss some stuff with Lucian, let him know down in the comments so he can invite me.
Yes, absolutely. General streamer dialogue. Down here, like, comment, subscribe, but definitely comments to let me know, to let us know what else you guys want, you folks want us to cover topic-wise. Anything else that you think is worth discussing and tearing apart like we tend to do critically. But yeah, absolutely. Comment away. I'm glad you've all been here. This has, as always, Skyen, this has always been a lot of fun. I love kicking back and discussing things like this with you, and I definitely look forward to doing a lot more so in the coming indeterminate amount of time. I can't even say coming months because we haven't actually talked about a follow-up to this one yet. But yeah, I think that's all we have for now.
For watching, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for watching. And that will be all for now. I will see you all later. Tomorrow I'll be torturing myself with spicy noodles. Skyen, what are you up to in the immediate future?
I'm taking a holiday.
Good idea.
I finally got the first vaccine, so I'm going to go see my family for the first time in a year and a half. Taking a little time off. And then Bloodborne. Bloodborne,
hell yes. I still need to get into that game. Obviously, we know a huge fan of the Bloodborne aesthetic. Especially with the Lovecraftian theme. That's something I've been definitely getting more into later. But for now, that'll be all for now. Good night, everybody. It's way early in the AMs for Skyen, so I won't be keeping you for much longer. Thank you again for hanging out, and for everybody else, thank you all for being with us. And as always, eat well, my friends.